I'm Carl, 38, and I never thought I'd be the kind of dad who'd sit staring at a half-melted birthday cake wondering what went wrong. But that's exactly what happened the afternoon my son turned 7. We'd set up everything perfectly, balloons tied to the backyard fence, a brand new grill I'd bought just for the occasion, and my wife, Rachel, had even made his favorite chocolate cake with blue frosting. My boy, Max, spent the morning checking the clock, asking when Grandma and Grandpa were coming, when Aunt Sarah would bring her dog, when his cousins would show up. I told him any minute now, every time. But the minutes turned into hours, and that yard stayed quiet except for the sound of the wind knocking a plastic cup off the table. To understand how painful that silence was, you'd have to know my family. We're not the kind that forgets birthdays, at least not when it comes to my sister, Sarah. She's the golden child. Always has been. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The one who didn't cause trouble, but somehow never did enough. When I graduated, Mom clapped politely. When Sarah got her first internship, they threw a dinner party. Even as adults, the pattern stuck. Every holiday revolved around her, her job, her wedding, her pregnancy, her new house. And when I became a dad, it was like my milestones didn't count. I told myself it didn't matter. I had my own little family now, Rachel, Max, and me. But that barbecue changed something in me that day. It started weeks before the party. I'd sent messages to our family group chat, something cheerful, simple. Hey everyone, we're having a small barbecue for Max's birthday next Saturday. Burgers, cake, games, would love to see you guys. Mom heart reacted the message. Sarah replied with a heart emoji too, saying, wouldn't miss it for the world. Even Dad texted, I'll bring my famous potato salad. Everything seemed fine. Rachel even said, see, maybe they're turning over a new leaf. She's an optimist like that. She wanted to believe the best in them. I wanted to believe it too. The day came, and we got up early. I mowed the lawn, Rachel set the table, and Max helped me blow up balloons. I grilled some burgers just before noon, because Mom always complains when the food's cold, and kept an eye on the driveway. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, nothing. By 3, the burgers were cold, and the ice cream cake had started to soften. Rachel tried to make small talk, playing upbeat music to keep the mood alive, but even she was glancing at her phone, checking if she'd missed a text. Max sat in the grass, poking at an unopened bag of chips, whispering, maybe Grandma's car broke down? My throat tightened. I told him, maybe, buddy, maybe. By 4:30, I gave up pretending. I cut the cake anyway, just so Max wouldn't think the whole day was ruined. He blew out his candles in front of 2 parents doing their best not to look heartbroken. I remember Rachel brushing a tear away and smiling too wide, the kind of smile that hurts your cheeks. Make a wish, she said brightly. Max took a breath and said, I wish everyone could come next time. I couldn't swallow for a minute. That wish hit me harder than anything. That night, I sent a short message to the group chat. We missed you guys today. Everything okay? No response. I thought maybe something serious had happened. Maybe Sarah went into labor early. Maybe Dad had a health scare. I would have understood. But the next morning, I checked Facebook. There they were, Mom, Dad, Sarah, her fiancé, and a few cousins, all smiling at a fancy restaurant downtown. The timestamp? Right during our barbecue. The caption under Sarah's photo read, pre-wedding brunch. So excited for everything coming up. I just stared at the screen for a long time, the smell of leftover smoke still in my shirt. Rachel came up behind me, saw the post, and whispered. They didn't even try to hide it. A week passed before I heard anything. Then Mom's text popped up out of nowhere. Don't forget Sarah's bridal brunch next weekend. $1,500 per head, formal attire. RSVP ASAP. That was it. No mention of Max. No apology. Not even a how are you. I don't know what I expected, but I guess it wasn't that. My hands actually shook. I called Rachel over, showed her the message, and she laughed. A bitter, tired laugh. They can spend a small fortune on her brunch, but couldn't even send a card for Max, she said. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the uneaten half of that birthday cake still sitting in the fridge. That's when I took a photo of it, the lopsided icing, the untouched candles, and sent it to Mom with a note. We're busy that day. I thought that would be the end of it. Silence. Fine by me. But 2 days later, I was out in the yard watering the plants when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel. Dad's old SUV pulled up fast. He slammed the door, stormed toward me, his face red. You think that was funny, Carl? he shouted before he was even halfway up the path. I froze. What are you talking about? I asked, though I already knew. Your little stunt with your mother. Sending that picture. Disrespecting the family like that. His voice shook with anger. Your sister's wedding is the biggest event of her life, and you mock it with cake. I blinked, trying to stay calm. You ignored your grandson's birthday, Dad, I said quietly. You all said you'd come. He waited all day. He waved his hand like I was speaking nonsense. We had other plans. You can't expect everyone to drop everything every time you throw a backyard barbecue. It was his birthday, I said, sharper this time. He's 7. Dad's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic, he said, lowering his voice but not his anger. Your mother's been under a lot of stress with the wedding. Sarah's handling so much. You could have been understanding instead of petty. That word, petty, it stuck to me like a splinter. I remember looking at him, realizing he truly didn't see anything wrong with what they'd done. In his mind, I was the problem. The overreacting son, the one who should have smiled and said, "It's okay," while they erased my kid's birthday from their calendar. Something in me cracked then, not loudly, but deep. I didn't argue. I just said, "You should go, Dad." He laughed, that dry laugh I'd heard my whole life. You're overreacting like always, he said. You want to distance yourself from the family, fine. But don't you dare embarrass your sister. You'll regret it. He got back into his car, muttering as he drove away. I stood there in the driveway, the hose still running, water pooling around my shoes. Rachel came out a moment later, eyes wide. Did he really just? She started. I nodded. She didn't finish her sentence. Instead, she turned off the hose and just hugged me. We're done trying, Carl, she said quietly. We're really done. And I think that's when the shift truly began. The slow unraveling that would turn into something bigger than either of us could have imagined. Because I wasn't planning revenge yet. Not then. But something in me had changed, something my parents wouldn't see coming. And that shift, it started showing sooner than I expected. After that day in the driveway, I tried to move on. I really did. I told myself Dad's anger was just him being protective over Sarah, that maybe he'd calm down. But he didn't. In fact, things only got stranger after that. The silence from my parents turned into a pattern, not the quiet kind where people cool off, but the deliberate kind where they wanted me to feel the distance. Calls went unanswered. Texts left on read. Even Rachel noticed it. They're icing you out, she said one evening as we sat in the living room, Max asleep upstairs. It's like they're punishing you for standing up for him. I didn't want to admit it, but she was right. My family had always used silence as a weapon. It's how they controlled people. You fall in line, or you get left out. About 2 weeks after the confrontation, I got a package in the mail. No note, no return address, but the handwriting on the label was unmistakably Mom's. Inside was a small white envelope with Sarah's registry printed across the front in gold script. I opened it and found an invitation for her bridal shower, complete with a request for monetary gifts only and a QR code for approved contributions. I just sat there staring at it. Rachel walked by and froze. You've got to be kidding me, she said. They actually sent this after everything? It wasn't just that they invited us. It was how they did it. No apology for the barbecue. No mention of the argument with Dad. Just a list of bank details for Sarah's honeymoon fund. That night, Rachel and I had one of those long, tired conversations couples have when they're worn down but trying to stay graceful. Maybe we should just send something small, she suggested. Just so they can't say we didn't. But the thought made me sick. They ignored our son's birthday, Ratch, I said. They ate brunch while he was blowing out candles alone. I'm not sending a cent. She sighed. I know. I just hate seeing you carry all this. It's like they get to live guilt-free while you sit here hurting. She was right again, and I hated that she was. Because no matter how hard I tried to let it go, the hurt clung to me. I kept replaying Max's words. Maybe Grandma's car broke down? It made me furious that he still defended them. A few days later, Mom finally broke the silence. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a message from her. Carl, I hope you've had time to think. Sarah would really appreciate it if you contributed something to her big day. Everyone else has already done their part. That was it. No greeting. No small talk. Just guilt, wrapped in polite words. I typed a response and deleted it 3 times before finally writing. We'll have to pass. Please stop asking. A minute later, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, she replied. I'm disappointed, but not surprised. I could almost hear her tone, the same one she used when I was a teenager and didn't want to wear the suit she picked for prom. It wasn't disappointment. It was control. Later that week, Rachel ran into my sister at a local store. When she came home, she looked shaken. "You won't believe what she said," Rachel told me, setting her bag down hard. "Sarah told me Mom said you threw a tantrum about the barbecue, that you embarrassed the whole family by making it about yourself." I laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that feels good. "Of course she did," I said. "Let me guess, she left out the part where they skipped it entirely?" Rachel nodded. "She said they didn't come because Mom thought it was too last minute and that you never confirmed the time." That one stung. I'd sent 3 reminders. My mom had literally liked the message with the time on it. They were rewriting the story, again, just like they always did. It wasn't the first time, either. Growing up, whenever something went wrong, I was the default scapegoat. If Sarah missed curfew, somehow I was the bad influence. If I got an A and she got a B, Mom would say, "You must have had an easier teacher." They twisted reality until it bent toward whatever narrative made Sarah shine and me shrink. Now, decades later, the pattern was repeating, just dressed in adult clothes. Except this time, it wasn't just me they were ignoring. It was my son, and that crossed a line. A week before the wedding, Dad called out of nowhere. I hesitated before picking up. "Carl," he said immediately, his tone clipped. "Your mother tells me you're being difficult." "I'm being clear," I replied. "We're not contributing, and we're not coming to the brunch." There was a long pause. Then he said, "Do you even realize how ungrateful that sounds? Sarah has done everything for this family. Everything." I clenched my jaw. "Everything." I repeated. "Dad, I've been paying for your lawn service for the last 2 years. I helped remodel your kitchen. What has Sarah done?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, "You always bring up money like it matters. That's not what family is about." "Right," I said quietly. "Unless it's $1,500 for brunch, then it's sacred." He exhaled sharply. "You know what, Carl? I don't even recognize you anymore. You used to care about family. Now you're just bitter." That word, bitter, hit me the way Petty had before. I realized that in his mind, standing up for myself wasn't strength, it was betrayal. "Maybe I got tired of being treated like an outsider," I said. "Maybe I finally learned that family shouldn't come with a price tag." I expected him to hang up, but instead he said something that chilled me. "You'd better hope your mother doesn't cut you out after this. She's updating some things, and I'd hate for you to regret your attitude later." I sat there in silence, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "Did you just threaten me over an inheritance?" I asked. "No," he said smoothly. "I'm reminding you what matters." After that, something inside me shut off. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't send another text or answer another call. I just stopped trying. But that didn't stop them. They found new ways to twist the knife. One night, Rachel showed me a Facebook post from Mom. It was a photo of Sarah holding up a glass of champagne, captioned, "So proud of our daughter. Such a blessing to see one child bring this family together." I read that line 3 times. "One child, huh?" Rachel just looked at me, waiting for me to say something, but I couldn't. I felt this mix of anger and clarity all at once, like I finally saw them for who they really were. And what hit hardest wasn't just that they favored Sarah. It was that they genuinely believed it was normal. Things escalated even more when Sarah's fiancé, Ben, called me. We'd never been close, but I respected him. "Hey, Carl," he said awkwardly. "Your mom wanted me to reach out. She's worried you might do something dramatic at the wedding." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," he continued, clearly uncomfortable. "She said you've been unpredictable lately, and that maybe it's better if you don't sit near the family table." I was stunned. "You think I'm going to ruin your wedding?" I asked. "Man, I didn't even plan on speaking." I know," he said quickly. "I don't think that. But you know how moms are. She just wants everything perfect." I hung up after that, too angry to speak. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was character assassination. They weren't just painting me as bitter. They were painting me as dangerous. The following weekend, Mom texted again. "We expect you to attend the rehearsal dinner, even if you refuse to contribute. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was the message. "No, please. No, we'd love to see you." Just an order. Rachel told me not to go, but I couldn't resist seeing what they'd say to my face. So I went, and it was worse than I imagined. The dinner was held at a rented hall. White linens, soft music, the works. When I walked in, The chatter dipped. Sarah saw me and smiled tightly. "Oh, you came," she said, like she'd just spotted an old coworker, not her brother. Mom gave me a polite nod, but she didn't stand to greet me. Dad avoided my eyes entirely. During dinner, they made a slideshow of Sarah's journey to love, full of family photos, childhood birthdays, family trips, graduations. There wasn't a single picture of me. Not one. When I realized it, Rachel's hand found mine under the table, squeezing it tight. "Don't react," she whispered. I didn't. But inside, something in me hardened completely. Every omission, every manipulation, every twist of truth, it all stacked together, building towards something inevitable. When it ended, Mom clinked her glass and stood. "To Sarah," she said proudly, "the heart of this family." Everyone clapped. I didn't. I just watched her, silent, calm, and for the first time in years, utterly done pretending. Because that was the night I decided things were going to change. They didn't know it yet, but I was already planning the moment that would make them finally understand what it felt like to be left out. And the opportunity to do that would come far sooner and far more publicly than any of them expected. The wedding day was supposed to be Sarah's crowning moment. That's how Mom described it. Anyway, the day our family finally gets to show everyone who we are. Those were her exact words on the phone with Rachel when she mistakenly thought I wasn't listening. Not who Sarah is, but who we are. That's the thing about my mom. Everything's about appearances. How things look has always mattered more than how things are. The venue was a sprawling estate outside town, the kind of place with fountains and ivy climbing the walls. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to go. Rachel and I went back and forth for days. She wanted to protect me, but I told her, if we don't go, it'll just give them another story to tell. Carl's ungrateful. Carl couldn't even show up. I wanted to face them, to look them in the eye one more time before I made my choice about cutting them off completely. So, against my better judgment, we went. The morning of the wedding, the tension was already thick. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Don't wear anything too flashy. This day isn't about you." That was her first text to me in weeks. No good morning, no drive safe. Just that. I showed it to Rachel, who shook her head. You could show up in a paper bag and she'd still find a reason to complain. When we arrived, everything looked perfect. The white chairs lined up under the oak trees, the band softly playing in the background, the photographers flitting around like dragonflies. But the second I saw my parents, I knew something was off. Mom was avoiding eye contact. Dad stood by the refreshment table, talking to Sarah's in-laws, laughing a little too loudly. Sarah herself looked radiant, but when she spotted me, her expression faltered, like she hadn't expected me to actually show up. "Carl," she said with that rehearsed brightness people use when they're being polite out of obligation. "Wow, you made it." "Yeah," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." She smiled tightly. "Good. Just, try to keep things easy today, okay? It's a really emotional day for Mom." That line hit me harder than I thought it would. Not, it's emotional for me, for Mom. Even on Sarah's wedding day, my mother had somehow made herself the star of the show. As the ceremony started, everything seemed normal. Rachel squeezed my hand as Sarah walked down the aisle. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could get through the day peacefully. But that thought didn't last long. Halfway through the reception, while everyone was eating and chatting, I noticed Dad and Mom whispering to the event coordinator, glancing occasionally in my direction. Rachel caught it too. "What's that about?" she murmured. I shrugged, but a cold unease crept up my spine. Then, right before the speeches began, the coordinator approached our table. "Excuse me," she said awkwardly. "The family wanted to move a few people around for photos. Would you mind taking a seat over there?" She pointed toward a small side table near the exit, far from the main family area. I blinked. "What?" "Oh, it's just for logistics," she stammered. "They need to keep immediate family together for the pictures and speeches." Rachel's jaw dropped. "He is immediate family," she said. "He's the bride's brother." The coordinator hesitated. "I'm just following instructions." I looked over at Mom, who was watching us from across the room. She didn't say a word, just raised her glass slightly, like this was all completely normal. I felt heat rise in my chest. Anger, embarrassment, disbelief all tangled together. Rachel reached for my arm. "Carl," she whispered, "don't make a scene. That's what they want." So I didn't. I stood up quietly, pushed in my chair, and walked to the side table. People were watching. Some cousins looked uncomfortable, others looked away. I sat down in silence while the speeches began. Mom was the first to speak. She stood with a glass of champagne, smiling that proud, performative smile she always wore in public. "To our beautiful daughter," she began, "the one who's always brought joy and pride to this family. You've made us so proud, sweetheart. You've shown grace, responsibility, and love in everything you do." I felt the words like tiny cuts. Grace, responsibility, pride. All the things she'd never once said about me. Then came Dad's turn. He took the microphone, chuckling. When Sarah was little, she used to tell me she'd grow up to marry a man just like her old dad. Hardworking, loyal, dependable. He paused for laughter. Well, she found someone better. And I couldn't be happier. Everyone clapped. I didn't. I just stared at my plate, pretending to focus on my food while something inside me started to twist. But then came the real blow. The part that changed everything. After the toasts, the coordinator announced there would be a special slideshow, a family tribute to the bride and groom. The lights dimmed, the screen lit up, and music started playing. Photos of Sarah and her fiancé flashed across the screen. Childhood pictures, vacation shots, family dinners. Everyone laughed and cheered. And then, halfway through, a series of old family photos appeared. There was one from our childhood, me, Sarah, and our parents at the lake. Only, I wasn't in it. I blinked. At first, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. But then another photo came up, one I remembered vividly, because I was in it when it was taken. Thanksgiving, 1998. I was right next to Sarah in the original picture. But in the version on the screen, my spot was cropped out entirely. Photo after photo, it was the same. Years of family memories, edited, trimmed, rewritten, until it looked like I'd never existed. Rachel's hand shot to her mouth. "Carl," she whispered. They edited you out." I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. It felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life, one I'd somehow been erased from. The room was full of laughter, clinking glasses, applause. And all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. When the slideshow ended, people stood to clap. I stayed seated. My parents didn't look my way once. Neither did Sarah. They just smiled, basking in the glow of their perfect family. Rachel leaned closer. "We should go," she whispered. "Right now." But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. I needed to see if any of them would even notice. So we stayed through dinner. Not one person came over to talk to us. Not one. It was as if we were invisible. At one point, my cousin Mark, one of the few decent people in the family, passed by our table and stopped. He gave me an uneasy look. "Hey man," he said quietly. "I didn't realize you weren't up there." I thought. He glanced toward my parents, then back at me. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm sorry." That's when I finally stood. Rachel followed. We walked toward the exit, weaving through the crowd. As we passed by my parents, Mom turned just slightly, her smile never fading. "Leaving already?" she said softly, as if she'd been expecting it. "Yeah," I said. Wouldn't want to ruin the perfect picture. For the first time that night, her smile faltered, just for a second. But she recovered fast. "Don't be dramatic, Carl. It's Sarah's day." I wanted to say 100 things. I wanted to tell her she'd finally succeeded. She'd erased me completely. But instead, I just said, "You made your choice, Mom." And I walked away. Rachel didn't say a word until we were in the car. The second we closed the doors, she exhaled shakily. I can't even believe that happened. They actually cut you out of your own family photos." I stared straight ahead. "They've been cutting me out for years," I said quietly. "They just finally made it official." We drove home in silence, the glow from the estate fading in the rearview mirror. That night, as I put Max to bed, he asked me if Grandma and Grandpa were coming to visit soon. I hesitated before answering. "Not for a while, buddy." He frowned. Did I do something wrong? That question broke me in a way nothing else could. I sat beside him and said, "No, you didn't. Some people just forget what matters." He nodded sleepily, not fully understanding. But I did. I understood perfectly. Because that night, staring at my son's face, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't about a ruined barbecue or an empty seat at a wedding. It was about showing him that family doesn't mean tolerating cruelty just because you share a last name. And as I lay awake later, Rachel beside me, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they wanted to erase me, fine. but they were about to learn what it felt like to be forgotten in return. Only, when my revenge finally came, it wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet, calculated, and it started with something as simple as a phone call that none of them saw coming. The morning after the wedding felt like a hangover, not from alcohol, but from disappointment. That kind of heavy, dull ache that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. I woke up early, long before the sun, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing. Rachel came downstairs quietly, her hair still messy from sleep. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me and put her hand over mine. For a long time, we didn't talk. There was nothing left to say. When the world finally started to wake up outside, the hum of cars, the distant barking of a dog, I broke the silence. They really did it, didn't they? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They erased me. Rachel looked at me, her eyes tired but steady. They did. And they'll keep pretending it's normal if you let them. I nodded slowly. I won't. But saying that and believing it were two different things. The truth was, the fallout hit me harder than I expected. 4 weeks after the wedding, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. My phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts. Nothing from my parents. Nothing from Sarah. The family group chat that used to ping every few days with updates about Sarah's life was now just a string of photos and congratulations from extended relatives, all ignoring me completely. At first, I thought maybe it would pass, that someone would reach out eventually. But no one did. Not even an apology. One afternoon, about 2 weeks later, Rachel called me from work. You might want to check your mail, she said. Her voice had that cautious tone, the one she used when she knew something would hurt. There was an envelope waiting when I got home. Thick, white, formal. My parents' address printed neatly in the corner. I opened it at the counter, expecting maybe a letter, maybe something about Sarah's honeymoon. Instead, it was a typed notice, cold and impersonal. It said that my parents were revising their estate distribution and that certain provisions would no longer apply. I stood there staring at the paper, my stomach dropping. It wasn't even about the money. It was what it symbolized. A final confirmation that I was no longer part of the family, not even on paper. When Rachel got home, she found me still holding the letter. They didn't even call, she asked quietly. I shook my head. They couldn't even pick up the phone. They just mailed it like it was a business transaction. She took the letter from me and tore it in half. Then treat it like one, she said firmly. You don't owe them a single thing. But it wasn't that easy. Because no matter how much anger I had, there was still that small part of me. The child who had spent years trying to earn their approval, whispering that maybe I'd gone too far, that maybe I really had disrespected the family. The guilt lingered longer than I wanted to admit. Every time Max asked about grandma or grandpa, it twisted the knife. I didn't want him growing up in the shadow of their favoritism. I didn't want him to think love had to be earned. So I started avoiding the subject altogether. When he asked to call them, I'd change the topic. When he drew a picture of grandpa's house, I'd tell him that maybe we'd visit one day, even though I knew we never would. The turning point came one afternoon at the grocery store. I was standing in line when I heard a familiar voice behind me, Sarah's. I froze for a moment before turning. She looked perfect as always, dressed in a pale coat, hair done, face flawless. And next to her was Mom. Of course. Carl, Sarah said, her tone cool. Didn't expect to see you here. I forced a small smile. Yeah. Just grabbing a few things. Mom didn't bother pretending. She looked me up and down and said, You look tired. I've been working a lot, I said flatly. She replied. You should focus more on your family. It's not healthy to isolate yourself. I stared at her. You mean like you did to me? Sarah shot me a warning look. Carl, not here. I almost laughed. Right? Wouldn't want to ruin the perfect image. Mom straightened, her voice icy. If you're going to continue this bitterness, maybe it's best if we keep our distance. You already did, I said quietly. You made that clear at the wedding. Something flickered across her face, a mix of guilt and pride, but she said nothing. Sarah cleared her throat and tugged Mom's arm. Come on, we're going to be late. They walked away without another word. I stood there for a long time after they left, feeling something inside me harden even more. Whatever fragile hope I'd held onto that things might change was gone now. Completely gone. When I got home that evening, Rachel and Max were in the yard, playing catch. I sat on the porch, watching them laugh, and that's when it hit me. This was my family. Not the people who ignored us. Not the ones who erased me, but the two people who showed up every day. The ones who loved without conditions. That night, I made a quiet decision. No big announcements, no dramatic gestures. Just a choice. I was done chasing people who didn't want me. Done trying to prove I was worthy of their attention. But walking away wasn't as simple as cutting off contact. It meant unlearning decades of habits, checking my phone for their messages, replaying old conversations, wondering what I could have said differently. It meant grieving the family I wished I had, not the one I actually did. Over the next few months, I poured myself into my work and my home. Rachel noticed it, how I'd started coming home earlier, how I made more time for Max. We started having dinners outside again, just like before the barbecue. At first, it felt forced, like I was pretending to be okay. But slowly, something shifted. The laughter came back, the lightness. And yet, even as I started to heal, my family didn't stop. They couldn't leave well enough alone. I found out through a cousin that Mom had been telling people I'd distanced myself out of jealousy, that I couldn't handle how successful Sarah was. It was like they needed a villain in their story, and I was the easiest choice. At first, I ignored it. But when it started reaching people at work, when a mutual acquaintance mentioned it casually at a conference, that's when I realized just how far they'd gone. Mom wasn't content with cutting me off. She wanted to rewrite my reputation too. I remember sitting in my car after that conversation, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse pounding in my ears. Enough, I muttered out loud. Enough. That night, I told Rachel everything. The rumors, the gossip, all of it. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. You can't win their game by playing it, Carl. But you can remind them who they underestimated. She was right. I didn't need revenge out of spite. What I needed was to reclaim control, to show them, and everyone else, that they couldn't define me anymore. So I started small. I stopped responding to anything that came through mutual channels. I changed my number, my email, even blocked Mom and Dad's accounts. I focused on work, building my projects, nurturing the company I'd started a few years back. It had been doing well before, but now I threw myself into it completely. I didn't talk about it publicly. I didn't brag. I just built quietly. Months passed. Seasons changed. Sarah and her husband moved into a new house. A gift, I later found out, from my parents. A family contribution, Mom called it on social media. That one stung a little, but not like before. Because by then, I had something they didn't know. Something I was building brick by brick, patiently, deliberately. And while they celebrated their picture-perfect life online, I was setting up the foundation for something that would one day make them regret every word they'd said, every cruel silence, every lie they'd told about me. They thought they'd erased me, but I was still here, and for the first time in my life, I was completely free. And the best part? They wouldn't even see the storm coming until it was already over their heads. The funny thing about starting over is that, at first, it doesn't feel like a rise. It feels like survival. The days blur together, and you're just trying to stay afloat, working, breathing, keeping your head down. That's how it began for me. But somewhere in that grind, something shifted. I stopped waiting for closure and started building a life that didn't depend on anyone's approval. For years, I'd been running a small home renovation business on the side, mostly remodeling kitchens and doing custom cabinetry. I'd started it after leaving my old corporate job because I wanted more time with Max, but I never saw it as anything special. Just a modest, steady income. After the fallout with my family, though, I threw myself into it like my life depended on it. I worked longer hours, took on bigger projects, and poured every bit of energy into growing it. I'd come home covered in sawdust, exhausted but fulfilled. There's a strange peace in building something real, something that can't be taken away or rewritten out of a slideshow. Rachel noticed it first. "You're different," she said one night while we were sitting on the porch, watching Max chase fireflies. "You're lighter." I smiled faintly. Maybe I just stopped expecting anything from people who never gave it. She nudged me. "No, it's more than that. You're actually happy." I hadn't realized it until she said it, but she was right. I wasn't waking up angry anymore. I wasn't replaying that wedding or the empty barbecue. I was just moving forward. Word of my work spread quickly. A real estate agent I'd done a small project for recommended me to a developer who wanted help redesigning a few historic homes. It was a big job, bigger than anything I'd handled before, but I took the risk. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control of something that mattered. That project changed everything. My designs caught the attention of a local magazine, which featured a small article about my business, calling it one of the most promising renovation firms in the region. Overnight, my inbox filled with requests. I had to hire 2 full-time workers just to keep up with demand. Then 4, then 8. Within a year, I opened a proper office downtown, a clean, minimalist space with my name on the door, Carl Whitman Design and Restoration. Standing there on the day we opened, Rachel by my side and Max running around the reception area with a juice box, I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood: pride. Not the kind my parents used to dangle in front of me like a prize, but the kind that comes from building something with your own 2 hands. And I made a promise to myself that day. This success wasn't just for me. It was for Rachel, for Max, and for every moment I'd spent waiting for people who never showed up. Success has a strange way of drawing attention, especially from people who once ignored you. At first, it was subtle. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in months sent a message. "Hey man, saw your article. Congrats, proud of you." Then another. Then one day, out of nowhere, Mom called. I saw her name flash on my screen while I was at the office, and for a full minute, I just stared at it. Rachel happened to be there dropping off lunch. "Are you going to answer?" she asked. "No," I said, setting the phone face down. "Not yet." She nodded. "Good. Make them wait." And that's what I did. For the first time in my life, they were the ones waiting on me. By the second year, business was booming. We'd expanded into commercial spaces, hired a small design team, and even got featured in a national home improvement show. It was surreal seeing my logo on TV, hearing the host talk about Carl Whitman's eye for detail. Rachel cried when she saw it. Max jumped up and down yelling, "That's Dad. That's Dad." I remember sitting with them on the couch that night, thinking, this is what it should have felt like all along. Genuine joy. Not performative, not conditional. Just real. But of course, the news traveled fast. My parents might have cut me out of their will, but they hadn't cut me out of their curiosity. The first sign that they'd caught wind of my success came through Sarah. She posted a photo of her new house on social media, all pristine marble and white walls, with a caption that read, "Finally settling in. Wish we had your design skills at Carl Whitman Design." Rachel showed it to me with a raised eyebrow. "That's bait," she said. I laughed. "Yeah, let them fish." I didn't comment. I didn't respond. I just kept moving. Then came the second sign, a text from Dad. Short and stiff. "Heard your business is doing well. We're proud of you." I read it 3 times before setting my phone down. Rachel asked if I'd reply. "No," I said simply. He wasn't proud when I needed him to be. That's the thing about power. It doesn't always look like money or status. Sometimes, it's just the ability to choose silence. Around that time, I also started investing, carefully, quietly. A friend I'd met through a client introduced me to a few smart opportunities in real estate. I bought a few old properties, fixed them up, and rented them out. Within months, those small investments turned into steady income streams. Before long, I wasn't just running a business. I was building an empire, one quiet decision at a time. Rachel was my rock through it all. She managed the finances, helped with the office decor, even started her own side venture, a small interior design studio that collaborated with mine. We became a team in every sense. And Max? He'd started telling everyone in school that his dad built houses for TV. Life was good, peaceful, ours. Then, about a year and a half after Sarah's wedding, I got an unexpected message from an unfamiliar number. "Hey Carl, it's Ben." I frowned. "Sarah's husband. I don't know if you've heard, but we're having some problems with the house. Something with the foundation. Thought maybe you could take a look." I stared at the message for a while. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sure," I replied finally. "Send me the address." When I arrived 2 days later, Sarah nearly dropped her coffee. She clearly hadn't expected me to show up. "Carl," she said, forcing a smile. "Wow, thanks for coming." I looked around. The house was huge, easily $1 million property. "Nice place," I said. "Yeah," she said, glancing nervously at Ben. "Mom and Dad helped a bit." Of course they did. Ben led me to the basement, where I found the issue immediately: water damage, severe enough that it would cost tens of thousands to fix. "Who did your inspection?" I asked. "Some company Dad recommended," Ben said. "Guess they missed this." I couldn't help it. I almost smiled. The irony was too rich. "Yeah," I said. "Looks like they did." Sarah followed me upstairs. Can you fix it? She asked softly. I met her eyes. Sure, but it's not cheap. How much are we talking? 30, maybe 40,000, I said casually. Her jaw dropped. 40,000. Foundation repairs aren't small jobs, I said. But you could call Dad's guy again if you want. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, we trust you. That word, trust, hit differently coming from her. The same sister who once told me to keep things easy at her wedding was now standing in front of me asking for help. I didn't say it out loud, but something inside me settled that day. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about balance. Over the next few weeks, my crew worked on Sarah's house. Every time I came by to check on progress, she was polite, even deferential. Gone was the smug confidence from before. One afternoon, while Ben was out, she stopped me at the door. I owe you an apology, she said suddenly. I didn't respond. She continued, voice shaking slightly. For the wedding. For everything. I don't know why Mom and Dad. Because that's who they are, I said quietly. You don't need to explain. She nodded, eyes glistening. They think you hate them, you know. I laughed under my breath. No, I just stopped letting them decide who I am. When the work finished, she tried to pay me extra, double the quoted amount. For your time, she said. I refused. No need. Just pay the invoice. That's when she looked at me and said, they're going to lose their minds when they find out you helped us. Then don't tell them, I said, half smiling. But of course, they found out anyway. They always did. A week later, Dad called again. I didn't pick up. Then another call. Then a voicemail. Son, we should talk. There's been a misunderstanding. I didn't listen to the rest. Instead, I went outside, looked at my home, the yard where Max played, the porch where Rachel sat reading, and realized I finally had what I'd wanted all along. Peace, stability, success that didn't need anyone's validation. But deep down, I knew something else too. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they needed me now. And soon, the moment would come when that need turned into desperation. When it did, I'd be ready, calm, composed, and holding all the cards. Because the truth was, the rise wasn't just about success. It was about shifting power. And for the first time in my life, every piece was finally in my hands, right where it belonged. It started subtly, like the first rumble of thunder before a storm. At first, I thought Dad's sudden attempts to reach out were just his usual cycle: guilt, denial, and then the fake reconciliation phase he used whenever he wanted something. But this time, something felt different. The tone of his messages wasn't just manipulative, it was anxious. And I could tell, instinctively, that something had shifted in their perfect little world. I didn't respond right away. I watched and waited, letting him send more messages, letting the tension build. Every few days, another voicemail. Carl, your mother and I are going through some things. Son, you've made a lot of progress. We're proud of how far you've come. And then, we might need your expertise soon. Just thought I'd give you a heads up. That one made me pause. Expertise? They hadn't used that word about me in my entire life. They'd always seen me as the less successful one, the hands-on type, as Mom liked to say in that condescending tone. The fact that Dad suddenly acknowledged my skill meant one thing: they were in trouble. A few weeks later, I got the full story, not from them, of course, but from my cousin Mark, the same one who'd quietly apologized to me at Sarah's wedding. He called one evening, hesitant. Carl, I thought you should know, your folks are in a bind. What kind of bind? They made a bad investment, he said carefully. Your dad got involved in some small property development deal with one of his golf buddies. It went south. Permits got denied, funding dried up, and now they're stuck with a half-finished complex and a mountain of debt. I stayed quiet, listening. Word is, they put part of their house up as collateral, Mark continued. And, well, the bank's not exactly being patient. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I asked, why are you telling me this? Mark hesitated. Because I think they're going to ask for help. And I know what they did to you. You deserve to know first. That night, I sat outside with Rachel, the sky clear and quiet. They're in trouble, I said. She looked up from her tea. Financial. Big trouble. Dad made a bad deal. They might lose the house. Rachel sipped slowly. You're not thinking about helping them, are you? I didn't answer right away. No, I said finally. But maybe I'll listen. She gave me that cautious look, the one that said she knew exactly what I was thinking. Carl, be careful. You don't owe them anything. I know, I said softly. but I owe myself closure. 2 days later, my phone rang again. It was Dad. This time, I picked up. "Carl," he said, too cheerfully. "Glad you finally answered. Been meaning to catch up." "Cut to it," I said. "What's going on?" He paused. "We've hit a little snag with the development project. Nothing major, just some bureaucratic nonsense. The city's being difficult, and the investors are getting jumpy. And, well," he said, lowering his voice, "we thought maybe you could take a look at the site. You've got that company now, right? You understand all the zoning and construction stuff." I almost laughed. "So you need my help?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "It's just you're good at what you do. We could use your insight. Maybe even a partnership." A partnership. The irony almost made me choke. The same man who once told me I wasn't built for business was now offering to partner with me. "Send me the details," I said calmly. The next day, he sent everything: the plans, the finances, the permits. It didn't take long to see the truth. The project was a disaster. No safety compliance, expired zoning permissions, unpaid contractors, a total mess. But one thing stood out: the land itself. It was valuable, sitting in a prime spot just outside the city limits. Developed properly, it could be worth millions. But as it stood, they dug themselves into a hole so deep that no bank would touch them. That's when the idea began to take shape, slow, methodical, like a chess game where every move has to be perfect. I called Dad back. "You're right," I said. "It's bad, but it's not hopeless. I could restructure it under my company, clean up the legal side, maybe even find investors. But I'd need full control." He hesitated. "Full control, full ownership of the land," I said. "Otherwise, no one will take it seriously. You can't fix something this broken if it's still tied to your name." He went quiet. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. "That seems a little drastic, don't you think?" "Not really," I said. "It's business. Either I fix it properly or not at all." He didn't like it, but desperation does strange things to pride. The next day, he called back. "Your mother and I discussed it. We'll sign it over, temporarily, as long as we can be included once it's profitable." "Sure," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Once it's profitable." Within a week, the papers were signed. My company, now officially owned the land that had almost bankrupted them. I spent the next few months quietly cleaning up their mess, settling debts, repairing the site, and filing all the missing paperwork. Once the city approved the new plans, I brought in a small group of investors. Not only did we revive the project, we turned it into something bigger, a mixed-use development with retail, housing, and commercial spaces. When construction began, I didn't tell my parents right away. They assumed it was still being sorted out. But a few months later, when the first phase was completed, the story hit the local business journal. Whitman Development Group announces $14 million urban renewal project. The article featured photos of me standing in front of the completed site, smiling with my team. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Mom, Dad, even Sarah. Dad's voice was shaking when he called. "Carl, what is this?" "You said." I said I'd fix it, I interrupted. "And I did. But you put it under your name." "Of course I did," I said calmly. "You signed it over to me, remember?" He sputtered. "We trusted you." "No," I said quietly. "You used me. There's a difference." Mom got on the line then. "Carl, please. You can't just cut us out like this." I almost laughed. "You mean the way you cut me out of my own family photos?" Silence. Then a faint, trembling voice. "We didn't mean for it to go that far." "But you did," I said. "And now it's gone full circle." For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't trying to explain myself or make them understand. I was calm, steady, completely in control. A week later, I mailed them something. A framed photo of the completed development, signed at the bottom with my company logo. And beneath it, a handwritten note. "Thanks for believing I couldn't do it." Rachel found me in my office that night, smiling faintly at the photo on my desk. "That's it, isn't it?" she said. "That's the moment." I nodded. No yelling. No revenge speech. Just silence. "The best kind," she said softly. But I wasn't done yet. There was one last thing, not out of spite, but out of principle. I learned from one of the contractors that my parents still owed several small businesses from their failed phase. Local workers they'd promised to pay and never did. Instead of letting those debts hang over their heads, I quietly paid them myself. Then I sent the receipts to my parents. When Dad called again, his voice was low. Why would you do that? Because that's what decent people do, I said. Something you might have taught me, if you'd ever shown up. There was a pause. Then, for the first time, he didn't argue. He just said quietly, "We lost you a long time ago, didn't we?" "You didn't lose me," I said. "You pushed me out. I just stopped coming back." That call ended with silence. No apology. No grand realization. Just quiet acknowledgement. And that was enough for me. Because the real revenge wasn't the land or the project or the success. It was seeing them finally face the truth that the son they'd dismissed, erased, and underestimated had built something stronger than their approval could ever be. And as I stood overlooking the finished development months later, my name on the sign, my company thriving, my family beside me, I realized something. They'd taught me all the wrong lessons growing up, but I'd used them to build the right life anyway. And while I thought that was the end, I had no idea the true fallout was still coming. The moment everything they'd built for themselves would collapse completely, not because of me, but because of what they'd done to cover their mistakes. And when it did, they'd come to me again. This time, though, I'd be the one answering the door on my terms. It all came crashing down faster than anyone expected. About 6 months after my development project launched, I started hearing whispers that my parents' financial situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. Their investment partner, the same man Dad had bragged about building an empire with, had filed for bankruptcy, and in doing so, exposed a pile of unpaid debts and falsified financial statements. Dad had signed off on more than one of them. Whether it was desperation or arrogance, I'll never know, but the fallout was brutal. Their house, the one I'd grown up in, was officially on the market, not by choice, but by foreclosure. They tried to hide it, of course. That's the thing about people obsessed with image. They'll drown smiling rather than admit they're underwater. But the news reached me anyway, first through Mark, then through a local article that made it all public. The headline was almost poetic. "Whitman family loses historic estate amid financial scandal." For days, my phone blew up with texts from people asking if it was true, if I'd known. I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. I just watched it all unfold from the quiet of my office, the same office that bore my name on the door, the one they once told me was too ambitious to ever work. Then, one rainy afternoon, it happened. There was a knock at my door. Rachel was the one who answered. I heard murmuring in the hallway. Then her soft voice sang, "Carl, you might want to come here." When I stepped out, Mom and Dad were standing in the lobby. They looked smaller, not just older, diminished. The confidence that used to radiate off them was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen in them before, humility. "Carl," Dad said, his voice unsteady. We didn't know where else to go. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at them, at the people who had erased me, ignored my son's birthday, cut me out of their lives and their legacy like I was a stain they could wash away. And now they were standing in my office, drenched from the rain, asking for shelter. Rachel quietly stepped aside, leaving us alone. "What do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Dad swallowed. "We're being forced to leave the house. We don't have anywhere else yet. We just need a little time." Mom's eyes were glassy. "We've made mistakes, Carl. We know that. But you're our son. Family helps family." That line, "family helps family," echoed in my head. It was the same line Dad had used when he made me pay for my sister's engagement gifts years ago. The same line Mom used to guilt me into understanding why Sarah deserved more. I took a slow breath. "You're right," I said finally. "Family does help family. That's why I paid off your unpaid workers. That's why I fixed the mess you left behind." They both looked startled. "But I can't help people who only remember I exist when they need saving," I continued. "You taught me that love should be earned. Now you're just living by your own rules." Mom started crying softly. Dad's jaw tightened, pride still fighting to survive under the weight of his downfall. "We're not asking for much," he said quietly. "Just a roof. Just until." "Until what?" I cut in gently. "Until you can rebuild the image again? Until you can tell people your son came through and make it sound like redemption instead of consequence." They didn't answer. The only sound was the rain tapping against the glass. I glanced toward the window, the skyline of the city glowing in the distance. The city where my projects now stood, where my name meant something. Then I looked back at them. "There's a motel 2 blocks down. Tell them Carl Whitman sent you. I'll cover 2 weeks. After that, you'll need to figure things out." Dad's mouth fell open. You're turning us away? No, I said quietly. I'm letting you go. Mom whispered. Please, Carl. We're sorry. I shook my head. You're sorry it caught up to you. Not for what you did. I walked them to the door myself. Dad hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else, but couldn't find the words. Mom looked back once, tears streaking down her face. Then they stepped out into the rain, arm in arm, the door closing softly behind them. Rachel came back a moment later. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah. For the first time, I think I am. That evening, after everyone left, I went up to the rooftop terrace of my building. The rain had stopped, leaving the city lights shimmering off wet pavement. I stood there, hands in my pockets, breathing in the cool air. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was peace, that rare, quiet kind that comes only after years of trying to earn something you never needed in the first place. I took out my phone, opened the photo of the finished development, the one they tried to take credit for, and stared at the inscription beneath my company logo, built with integrity. Owned with purpose. A small smile tugged at my lips. They'd taught me how to live without them, and I'd finally learned. And that night, as the city hummed below me, I sent one last message to my father's number before deleting it for good. You wanted to show the world who our family really was. Mission accomplished. My name is Alex. I'm 31, and I've always been the extra sibling in my dad's second family. That's how they made me feel, at least. I was born from his first marriage. My mom passed away when I was 10, and by the time I was 12, he had married my stepmom, Denise, and they had 2 kids of their own. From the outside, we looked like your average blended family. From the inside, it was like living in a house where every room had a door you weren't allowed to open. My stepmom always had a polite smile for me, but it stopped at her lips. My half-brother Ryan, 2 years younger than me, made it clear from day one that he didn't consider me real family. My sister Ellie mostly followed his lead, though she had moments where she seemed like she wanted to connect, until Denise would glance over, and suddenly Ellie would be cold again. I spent my teenage years learning how to exist quietly in that house. My dad, well, he wasn't cruel, but he was passive. If Denise wanted me excluded from something, he'd go along with it. If Ryan pushed me too far, he'd sigh and say, let's just keep the peace. I grew up learning that if I wanted a place in this family, I had to work for it, earn it. So that's exactly what I did. I got good grades, paid for college with scholarships and part-time jobs, and when I graduated, I landed a solid job in tech. When COVID hit, I helped everyone in the family set up home Wi-Fi, got them on Zoom, even fixed Ryan's resume so he could land a remote job. I never heard a thank you. I wasn't expecting one, but deep down I still hoped. That hope was stubborn. Maybe if I helped out more, showed up more, did more, eventually they'd see me. Eventually they'd stop treating me like the ghost in the corner of the group photo. So when Easter rolled around this year, and Denise texted me in the family group chat asking if I could help organize things, I said yes without thinking twice. She said it so casually, like she wasn't dumping half the holiday on me. Could you clean up the house a bit before folks arrive? Would you mind confirming with the caterer? Oh, and the kids really love that egg hunt you did last year. It didn't feel like a request. It felt like my usual invisible job description. But still, I said yes. I booked the caterer myself, paid the deposit up front, nearly $700, since Denise said she'd Venmo me later. Spoiler, she didn't. I showed up early to clean, scrubbed the guest bathroom, arranged the folding chairs, even ironed the tablecloths because she had mentioned they looked wrinkled in last year's pictures. I did it all while they were out getting their nails done or shopping for matching pastels at the mall. By the time everyone started arriving, I was already exhausted, but I smiled anyway. I wore a nice button-up and even put on those shoes that pinch a little because I knew they looked good in photos. I helped the kids with the egg hunt, handed out baskets, kept count to make sure no one ended up crying over missing candy. Denise watched from the patio with a mimosa in hand, never once offering to help. My dad grilled outside while nodding absently to whatever Ryan was rambling about. Crypto, or his new sports car, or how 9-to-5 jobs are for losers. I just kept smiling. Dinner was served buffet style. I made sure the lines stayed orderly, refilled the drinks, helped Ellie carry a tray when she said her wrists hurt. But when I finally sat down, plate barely touched, Ryan looked up from carving into his ham, gave me this smirk, and said, Funny how you think any of this makes you one of us." He laughed like it was a joke, but no one else laughed. My dad kept slicing the ham like he didn't hear it. Denise didn't even look up. Ellie glanced at me, then looked away. And that's when something just broke in me. Not loudly, not all at once. It was like a quiet, final snap, like the sound of thread pulling free from a button. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there for a moment, staring at the plate in front of me, at the roast potatoes I'd helped arrange in a perfect spiral that morning. And then I laughed. Quietly. Not at anything funny, just the absurdity of it all. The absurdity that I'd spent over a decade trying to earn my seat at a table that was never set for me. So I stood up. No one noticed right away. I walked out through the hallway, into the coat closet, and picked up my laptop bag. I had brought it in case I needed to hop on a quick work call, but now it had a different purpose. I walked out to the driveway and opened the trunk of my car. I had a folder there, labeled clearly, with receipts, copies of signed contracts, and bank statements. I pulled it out. Back inside, I walked past the dining table, past Denise and her perfect centerpiece and Ryan and his smug, empty grin. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the fuse box near the laundry room and shut off the circuits labeled Main Kitchen, Outdoor Lighting, and Media Center. Then I walked out the front door, and I started taking back everything that had my name on it. I didn't rush. I wanted to feel it, every step, every second of reclaiming what was mine. It wasn't about vengeance, not yet. It was about clarity, the kind that settles over you when you stop begging to be chosen and start choosing yourself. I popped the trunk, pulled out the list I had printed weeks earlier but never planned to use, not unless they pushed me too far. Well, Ryan had done the honors with just one sentence. The first item on my list? The outdoor heater. I bought it last Christmas because Dad mentioned Denise was always cold during patio dinners. I unscrewed the gas line with the little wrench I kept in my emergency kit, wheeled it carefully to my car, and loaded it in. The sound of the back gate creaking open caught my attention. It was Ellie. "Alex," she asked, voice low, cautious. "What are you doing?" I didn't stop moving, taking back what's mine. She stepped forward, hesitant. "Wait, are you okay?" I mean, Ryan was being... Ryan. I paused and looked her in the eye. "You laughed last time he told me I should be grateful Dad didn't ship me off to Mom's family. You didn't speak up then either." Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. I wasn't angry at her. Not really. I think she wanted to be decent once. But being decent in that house meant being different. And different wasn't safe, not if you were one of Denise's kids. She backed off without a word. I turned back to my list. The surround sound speakers came next. I had installed them myself last summer, spent 2 full days threading cables through drywall while Ryan sat inside complaining that I was making too much noise. He still bragged to his friends about how his setup was better than a movie theater. I unhooked every cable, coiled them carefully, and packed the speakers into the original boxes I kept in my garage. If I paid for it and installed it, it was mine. The security system? That one was easy. I owned the subscription, had the admin login, and installed every camera. One click on my phone, and the network unpaired. Every camera blinked twice, then went dark. I deleted all the saved video logs while I was at it, just for good measure. That's when Dad finally noticed something was wrong. I heard the front door open. He stepped out slowly, holding a half-eaten roll in his hand like he'd forgotten he was still eating. "Alex? What's going on?" I didn't turn around immediately. I was halfway through coiling the garden hose I'd bought, because, of course, there's had a leak no one fixed for 2 years. "Taking back the things I brought into this house," I said, not even looking at him. I figured it's time I stopped pretending I belong somewhere I'm not welcome. He stood there, silent. Then came the sigh. That familiar, tired sigh he used every time he didn't want to confront something. "This isn't necessary. Let's not make a scene." I stood up straight and turned to face him. "You think this is a scene?" What Ryan said back there wasn't a scene. What Denise does to me year after year, that's not a scene. You've stood by every time she's cut me out of family photos, forgotten my birthday, told the caterer I wasn't part of the guest count. And you said nothing. So no, Dad, this is me finally saying something. He didn't answer. Just looked at me like I was overreacting. Like I was the problem. I smiled. "Don't worry. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to break anything. I'm just going to finish collecting what's mine, and then I'm done." And I meant it. Over the next hour, I dismantled the patio lighting, my gift 2 Easters ago, pulled the smart TV from the living room wall. Denise had wanted something sleek, and even removed the backup generator I bought during last year's power outage. Everything I paid for. Every little thing they had grown used to having, but never once thanked me for. Ellie never came back out. Ryan didn't bother pretending to help. Denise? She stood in the kitchen window, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't look angry. She looked inconvenienced, as if I were interrupting her meal prep. When the car was full, I opened the trunk and placed one final box inside. It was the custom Easter centerpiece I made out of wood and hand-painted ceramic eggs. Denise had praised it once to a neighbor, called it charming, then told me not to bring anything so rustic next time. I took it anyway. I left nothing behind that had my fingerprint on it. As I closed the trunk and got in, I heard the front door creak open again. This time, it was Ryan. He didn't yell. He didn't smirk. He just leaned against the railing with a soda in his hand and called out, "You seriously think anyone's going to miss you?" I rolled down the window just enough and looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said, "but they'll miss what I brought." Then I backed out of the driveway, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror. The house I used to think I belonged to. The house that had taken so much and given so little. But what happened after I drove away? That's the part no one expected. And it's where the real fallout began. It took exactly 3 days for the first message to come in. Not from Ryan. Not from my dad. But from Denise. It was a short text. Cold. Sterile. "Hey, just noticed the thermostat system is offline. Could you check it? The house feels like an icebox." I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted the message, archived it, and moved on with my day. See, what Denise didn't realize, what none of them realized, was just how much I'd been holding together in that house. The smart thermostat? Registered in my name. The mobile app that let them adjust the temperature from their phones? Licensed through my account. I had set up the Wi-Fi mesh system, linked the devices, made sure their router firmware stayed updated. Every time Ryan bragged about how modern and seamless their home was, he was bragging about my labor. My money. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time from Ellie. "Hey, not sure what's going on, but none of the TVs are working. Did you cancel something?" I considered replying. Ellie was the only one who ever came close to treating me like a person. But then I remembered the dozens of times she looked away when Denise took verbal jabs at me. The way she laughed, nervously, but still laughed, whenever Ryan said something cruel. I didn't owe her anything. Instead, I logged into my streaming service accounts, Netflix, Hulu, Prime, and hit the sign out of all devices button on every single one. I changed the passwords. Added 2FA. The next morning, the group chat lit up. Dad texted, "Alex, is there a reason all the house lights are flickering?" Ryan texted, "Bro, what is this? My Xbox won't connect. Did you mess with the Wi-Fi?" Denise texted, "This is really immature. You're making a point. We get it. You can stop now." I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't ready to speak. Instead, I did something else. I called the contractor who had helped me install the backup generator last year. It wasn't cheap, almost $5,000, but I put it on my credit card and paid it off over time. They'd never even offered to pitch in, even after the blackout last December when the whole neighborhood lost power and their house stayed fully lit. I still remember the thank you I never got. I told the contractor I was moving homes and needed the unit relocated. "No problem," he said. He could have someone out by Friday. They were still texting when the electrician showed up. Ryan tried to stop him at the door. "You can't just take that. This is our house." But the paperwork? It was clear. Purchase receipt in my name. Installation contract under my billing address. Ryan stood in the driveway, shouting at a man holding a clipboard, while the generator was carefully disconnected and loaded onto a truck. That image, him flailing like a toddler denied a toy, was a little gift from the universe. That night, I finally answered. Just one message, sent to the group chat at 11:47 p.m. "Don't worry, I'm just doing what you all taught me. Taking care of what's mine." I muted the chat after that. But the fallout wasn't over. A week passed. I focused on work. I bought new furniture, updated my space, finally got that espresso machine I'd been eyeing. Life felt quieter. Lighter. But then, something strange happened. My dad called. I stared at the screen, unsure what to do. He never called. He let Denise or Ellie handle the family communications. Still, I answered. Out of curiosity more than anything. "Alex," he said after a pause, "we need to talk." His voice sounded different. Not angry. Not commanding. Just tired. "What about?" I didn't realize how much you were doing for this family," he said, slowly. I guess I let some things slide I shouldn't have. I didn't say anything. Let the silence stretch. I was wondering, he continued, if you could at least send the new Wi-Fi password. Ryan's been having issues with his remote work setup. I laughed. A quiet, single laugh. It wasn't bitter. It was almost amused. I'm not your IT guy, Dad, I said. I was your son. Once. That didn't seem to count for much. He didn't know how to respond. I could hear it in the way his breathing hitched. Is this really how you want to handle things? No, I said, but it's how you handled things. For years. Then I hung up. That night, I started going through my accounts, utilities, insurance, subscriptions. One by one, I removed my card information from everything connected to their address. The water bill? Gone. The electricity autopay? Canceled. I left them with the standard service plans, no discounts, no perks. Let them call and sit on hold for 3 hours like everyone else. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email. A letter. Thick envelope. My name written in cursive. Inside was a folded piece of paper with my dad's handwriting. It started with, Alex, I know I haven't been the father you needed me to be. I didn't read the rest. Not right away. I sat there, letter in hand, thinking back over every year I'd spent trying to prove myself worthy of a family that never tried to meet me halfway. And just as I was about to crumple it and toss it in the trash, I saw something else tucked behind the letter. A check. For $700. The exact amount I'd spent on the Easter catering. I stared at it. That's when I realized they were scared. Not just of losing services. Not just of inconvenience. They were scared because, for the first time, I had stopped asking to be seen. And I had started showing them what it felt like to be invisible. I sat with the check in my hand for a long time. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. That $700 wasn't even a drop compared to the thousands I had spent over the years. The holidays, the tech, the furniture, the utilities. But still, seeing it written out like that, signed in my dad's careful handwriting, made something inside me pause. It was the first time anyone in that house had attempted to repay me. Not emotionally. Not with an apology. Just a transaction. A number. It felt cold, but also revealing. Because now I knew exactly what I was worth to them. $700. Not a second more. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I walked over to my kitchen drawer, pulled out an old envelope, and slid the check inside along with the unopened letter. Then I tucked it behind my tax documents. Not out of sentimentality, but because I wanted a reminder. A physical receipt of how far I'd come, and how far I wasn't willing to go back. The following week, I got a call from Ellie. At first, I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail. She tried again the next day. Then the day after that. On the fourth call, I finally answered. Her voice came through soft, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak to me. Hey. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I said nothing. Not yet. I wanted to hear what she thought everything meant. I didn't stand up for you. I let Ryan talk to you like that. I let Mom treat you like help. I always knew it was wrong, but I told myself it wasn't my place to fix it. That it was easier not to stir things up. But I saw how they looked after you left, Alex. It was like something cracked open. Everything felt exposed. Quiet. Even Ryan stopped talking for once. I still didn't reply. I read your old message again, she said. The one in the group chat. The one where you said you were just doing what they taught you. Taking care of what's yours. I think that hit harder than you realized. It wasn't meant to be poetic, I finally said. It was just the truth. She sighed. Yeah, that's the part that hurt. There was a long silence between us. Not tense, just honest. Then she added, they're talking about selling the house. That made me sit up. What? Yeah. Dad says it's too much to maintain now. The heating's a mess. The outdoor stuff's broken. And well, Denise is embarrassed. She had friends over last week and the power flickered during lunch. Ryan lost a freelance gig because the Wi-Fi dropped in the middle of a call. So, I said slowly, now that things are inconvenient, they want to give up. She didn't argue. They don't even realize it wasn't the stuff I took that broke the house. I added, it was the foundation. I know, she said quietly. That's why I'm not calling for them. There was another pause, and then she said something that surprised me. I want to stay in touch. I don't care about Denise's side of the family anymore. I miss my brother. My real brother. That hit me in the chest. Harder than I expected. Because for all the years I felt like I was shouting into a void, here was someone on the other side, whispering back. Then show me. I said gently. Not with words. With actions. I will, she promised. And to her credit, she did. Ellie started coming by once a week. Sometimes she'd bring food. Sometimes we'd just sit and talk. We kept it light at first. Work, books, random stuff on TV. But slowly, we got into deeper things. She started telling me how much pressure she felt growing up, being the perfect daughter in Denise's image. How exhausting it was to pretend all the dysfunction was normal. How guilty she felt every time she laughed at Ryan's jokes, just to avoid becoming his next target. I told her the truth, too, that I had spent most of my 20s thinking I just needed to do more to earn love. That every time I got them a gift, or fixed a problem, or paid a bill, I hoped maybe this would be the thing that finally made me feel like family. And how, in the end, it had taken walking away to realize I didn't need to earn anything. That I'd been enough all along. Meanwhile, the rest of the family? They didn't change much. Denise still posted filtered pictures on Facebook, pretending everything was fine. She told her friends I was going through a phase. Ryan made a few jabs online about ungrateful siblings and drama queens, but he knew better than to tag me. My dad called a few times. I let it go to voicemail. Sometimes he left long, rambling messages. Other times, just a quiet, "Hope you're doing okay, son." I listened, but I never replied. I needed more than voicemails and checks to undo years of silence. About 2 months after Easter, I got an email from my old electrician, the same guy who had removed the generator. He told me he'd been contacted by a realtor looking to install a new generator at the same house. "They're prepping it for sale," he said. "Thought you'd want to know." I did. So I drove by one afternoon. Just parked across the street. The house looked smaller somehow. The yard was unkempt. The patio furniture stained from weather. The wind had knocked over one of the garden statues I'd bought. No one had bothered to fix it. A for sale sign stood in the front lawn. Underneath, a smaller sign. Price reduced. Motivated seller. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally understood something. That house hadn't been a home in years. Not for me. Maybe not for anyone. It was just a stage. And I had finally walked off of it. Months passed. Ellie and I grew closer. We went on sibling hikes, shared playlists, even planned a weekend trip together. Real memories. Built from scratch. With no catering, no perfect lighting, no curated appearances. Just the two of us, rebuilding something honest. Eventually, I took that check out of the drawer. I didn't cash it. I framed it. I hung it above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the best repayment I ever got wasn't a dollar amount. It was freedom. Freedom from needing their approval. From chasing their affection. From dimming myself just to fit into a broken picture. And as I stood in my own space, with my own life, surrounded by things I chose and people who chose me back, I realized the family I wanted all along wasn't the one I was born into. It was the one I chose to build after I stopped begging to belong. And that was worth far more than $700. My name's Owen, I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the useless one. That's not something I came up with for dramatic effect. That's what my parents actually called me. Not once in a fit of anger, not as a joke, but as my permanent label. The useless one. It was like a brand burned into me before I even had a chance to prove who I was. My sister, Claire, on the other hand, was the family prodigy. From the moment she could walk, they made it clear that she was the golden child, the investment, the future. I was the background noise in a house that only ever clapped for her. Growing up, I learned pretty fast that affection in my family wasn't free. It had to be earned, and even then, it came with conditions. When I brought home a B+, my mom would sigh and say, "You just don't have your sister's focus." When Claire got an A, there'd be a celebration, a dinner out, a dozen photos. My dad would raise his glass and say, "That's my girl, making the family proud." I remember once when I was 10, I built a small robot for the school fair. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The judges loved it. I even got a ribbon. My dad walked past the table, looked at it, then at me, and said, "Cute." Claire could have made it walk faster. Then he moved on. It's funny, when you grow up being compared to a prodigy, you stop trying to compete. You start surviving instead. I did the chores no one noticed, filled the silences no one wanted to hear, and learned to be invisible. I got a part-time job at 16 because my parents said they didn't believe in handouts. Meanwhile, they gifted Claire a brand new convertible for her 16th birthday. Red, with a ribbon on top. When she got into Yale, the whole town knew within 24 hours. There was a full-page announcement in the local paper, a catered party in our backyard, and a speech from my dad that could have been aired on TV. I still remember his words like they were carved into me. Claire is proof that hard work and good breeding pay off. He didn't even glance at me during the applause. By that time, I'd already accepted my role as the family disappointment. I didn't go to college right away. I worked odd jobs, saved money, and eventually started helping out at a small repair shop. The owner, a quiet guy named Martin, taught me how to fix things, real things. Engines, generators, old machines no one believed could work again. I liked it. It was honest work, and for once, I didn't feel useless. My parents, of course, called it wasting potential. My mom once said, "You could at least do something respectable like accounting. Fixing junk doesn't suit a Lawson." Claire, meanwhile, climbed every ladder laid in front of her. Top of her class, summa cum laude, internship at a hedge fund, and then a cushy position at my dad's company before she even graduated. My dad ran a logistics firm, big contracts, international deals, the kind of empire that made him a local legend. And Claire, naturally, became his heir apparent. By 25, she was on the board. By 27, she was already giving orders that even senior staff obeyed. I didn't envy her at first. I just detached. We lived different lives in different worlds. But the more successful she became, the more my parents leaned into humiliating me, as if every promotion she got was proof that I didn't measure up. Thanksgiving dinners turned into corporate briefings about her achievements. "You should take notes, Owen," my dad would joke, cutting into his steak. "Maybe you'll learn something about discipline." Claire would smirk and say, "He's doing his best, Dad. Not everyone's built for success." It was the way she said it, the fake sympathy that stung worse than the insults. But the real turning point came last year when my father invited me, for the first time in years, to attend one of his company galas. "Family should be there," he said. I almost didn't go, but curiosity got the better of me. The event was held at the downtown hotel, decked out like something out of a movie, chandeliers, champagne, people in tuxedos laughing too loud. I showed up in my only decent suit, a hand-me-down that still smelled faintly of mothballs. I figured I'd blend in quietly and maybe slip out early. But the moment I walked in, I felt the stares. My dad was on stage, giving a speech about legacy and leadership, and when he saw me, his expression tightened. "Oh," he said into the mic. "Even Owen made it tonight." The crowd chuckled politely. My face burned. I forced a smile and nodded. He went on, "This is a proud moment for the Lawson family. Claire has not only upheld our name, she's elevated it. She's the future of Lawson International." Then he raised a glass to her. People cheered. My mom dabbed her eyes. Claire stood beside him, glowing under the spotlight, and for a brief second, she turned to me. Her eyes met mine, not with warmth, not with pride, just amusement, like she was watching a spectator at her coronation. After that night, I started noticing small changes, things that didn't add up. My dad stopped inviting me to family dinners altogether. My mother sent me short, clipped texts. "Claire's busy this week, maybe next time." I'd occasionally stop by the house to drop something off, only to find the locks changed. When I asked about it, my father said, "Oh, we upgraded security. Don't take it personally." But I did. Of course I did. Then came the moment that still replays in my head, Claire's Yale graduation. It was supposed to be her big day, her triumph. My parents rented out a section of the auditorium, complete with a banner that said Lawson Legacy. I sat alone in the back, wearing a suit I could barely afford to dry clean, while my family filled the front rows like royalty. When the ceremony ended, the dean invited my father on stage to give a short speech, a special family moment, he called it. My dad took the microphone and, smiling proudly, announced that Claire would not only be taking over as CEO one day, but would also inherit everything. The $12.5 million estate, the company, even his personal watch, a symbol of legacy and leadership. The crowd clapped. My mother teared up. Claire hugged him and whispered something that made them both laugh. I just sat there, hands clenched, trying not to look like I cared. But I did. I cared more than I wanted to admit. That's when it happened. As the crowd began to disperse, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there stood a man I'd never seen before. Black suit, neatly combed hair, the kind of presence that instantly commands attention. He handed me a sealed envelope and said quietly, "Mr. Lawson, your father forgot who really owns it all." I blinked, confused. "Excuse me." He leaned closer. "It's time to remind him." And before I could ask anything else, he walked away into the crowd, disappearing like a shadow. I sat there staring at the envelope, my heart pounding. The seal was embossed, my grandfather's crest. The same crest that used to hang above my father's office door before he had it replaced with the company logo. My grandfather, the real founder of Lawson International, had built everything from scratch after the war. He was a hard, no-nonsense man, but fair, the kind who believed in earning your place. He passed when I was 12, but I remember him clearly. He used to say, "Legacy isn't what you're given, it's what you protect." I hadn't heard his name mentioned in years. My father barely spoke of him. My hands trembled as I held that envelope. For a moment, I thought about throwing it away. I didn't want to get caught in whatever drama this was. But something in me, something tired, angry, and deeply buried, wouldn't let me. So I slipped it into my jacket and walked out before anyone noticed. As I stepped into the cold evening air, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Don't make a scene, Owen. Be proud of your sister for once." I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, then at the envelope in my hand. The city lights reflected off the wax seal, and for the first time in my life, I felt something new. Not sadness, not jealousy. Something colder. Purpose. When I got home that night, I placed the envelope on my kitchen table, sat down, and stared at it for a long time. Whatever was inside, I knew it wasn't just paper. It was history. It was truth. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first crack in the perfect image my parents had built around Claire. But before I opened it, I noticed something odd, faint handwriting on the back, written in my grandfather's old-fashioned script, "For the rightful heir." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because, for the first time, I wasn't sure who my family really was anymore. And when I finally broke the seal the next morning, I realized that everything I'd been told about my place in this family was a lie. The envelope contained several sheets of thick parchment paper, the kind my grandfather always used, neatly folded with a handwritten note on top. His handwriting was unmistakable, firm, slanted, deliberate. I unfolded the first page, and as I began to read, the words hit me like a punch to the chest. It wasn't a letter. It was a copy of his will. Not the one my father had shown everyone years ago after the funeral, but an older version, or maybe the real version. The document stated that the controlling shares of Lawson International, the family estate, and several investment trusts were to pass not to my father, but to his grandchildren. It even specified conditions. The heir would be the grandchild who demonstrates character, integrity, and independence, not entitlement. And then, beneath that, a signature from my grandfather and 2 witnesses. My name was on the attached document, not Claire's. "To my grandson, Owen Lawson," it said. "For the one who builds, not the one who takes." I just sat there, stunned, the paper trembling in my hands. For years, I thought my grandfather had left everything to my father. That's what Dad always said. He told me there wasn't much left after taxes and restructuring. But this was something else. A legal declaration that contradicted everything we'd been told. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a lawyer or money for one. So I did the only thing that felt right. I called Martin, the guy who owned the repair shop where I worked. He was like a quiet mentor to me, always calm, never judging. When I told him what I found, he didn't say much at first. Then he said, "Owen, people like your father don't hide documents like that unless they're afraid of what's in them." That sentence stayed with me. I tried reaching out to my mom the next day, casually at first. I called her and asked if she remembered anything about Grandpa's original will. She went silent for a few seconds, then said, "Why are you bringing that up now?" I said I just found something that seemed off. She gave a cold laugh and said, "Owen, you really need to stop living in the past. Your grandfather trusted your father to make the right decisions. That's all that matters." I could hear Claire's voice in the background, telling someone to pass the champagne. It sounded like they were celebrating something. When I mentioned that the man at graduation gave me something, the tone of her voice changed instantly. "What man?" she asked sharply. "Who was he?" I told her I didn't know. Silence. Then, she said quietly, "Whatever you were given, Owen, destroy it. It's probably some kind of scam." That's when I knew I couldn't tell them anything more. Over the next few weeks, things got strange. My father called out of nowhere one evening, his voice forced and tight. "I heard you've been asking questions about Grandpa's will," he said. "Let's not go down that road. The company's fine, the family's fine, and there's no reason to stir up old nonsense." I asked him how he knew I was asking. He didn't answer. He just said, "You've always been a good boy, Owen. Don't ruin that now." Then he hung up. After that, I started getting visits. First subtle, then not so much. One afternoon, I came home to find a man sitting in a black sedan across the street. Sunglasses, no expression. He was there again the next day. And the next. When I finally walked up to him to ask what he wanted, he rolled up the window and drove off. I told Martin about it, and he frowned. "They're watching you," he said. "Your father's nervous." Meanwhile, Claire was everywhere. Magazine features, interviews, charity events. Her name was plastered on every article about the next generation of visionary leaders. She talked about family legacy, like she was carrying the torch of destiny. Watching her give speeches about hard work while I knew the truth felt surreal. I started keeping my distance from everything Lawson-related, but staying quiet only seemed to make them more suspicious. One morning, I woke up to an email from HR at Lawson International. It said my father had extended an offer for me to come work for the company. A small position, the email read, as a gesture of goodwill. The salary was pitiful and the description was vague. But what caught my attention was the timing. Just a week after I'd found the will. I didn't respond. 2 days later, Claire called. She rarely ever called me directly, always through mom or dad, so I knew it wasn't going to be pleasant. "Hey, little brother," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Dad told me you've been curious about some things lately." "Curious?" I asked. About Grandpa. About the company." She laughed lightly. "You know how people talk. I just wanted to remind you, we're family. And family doesn't go digging through old ghosts." Her tone turned slightly sharper. "You don't want to make things awkward for yourself. Dad's been generous, considering how little you've contributed to the family." I clenched my jaw. "I don't need his generosity." "Oh, come on," she said. "We all know you wouldn't survive without mom and dad's help. That repair shop of yours isn't exactly Wall Street." "I'm doing fine," I said flatly. "Sure you are," she replied with a smirk in her voice. "Anyway, I just thought I'd warn you before Dad gets really upset. You know how he gets." I didn't answer. She sighed. "Look, Owen, there's a dinner next week at the house. Come by. Let's just clear the air." Okay. Against my better judgment, I went. The house hadn't changed. Same marble floors, same portraits of Claire on the walls, same air of quiet perfection. When I walked in, my mom gave me a quick hug, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. My father sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone. Claire was at his right side, her Yale ring flashing under the light. We ate in near silence until my dad said, "Owen, I've been thinking. It's time you take more responsibility. Maybe if you worked under your sister, you'd finally learn something." Claire chuckled. "I could use an assistant. Someone to fetch coffee, maybe." My mother laughed too, that light, polished laugh she used when she wanted to sound supportive but superior. "I'm not working for Claire," I said quietly. The table went still. My father's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated. "I have my own job." He leaned back, voice cold. "You call fixing garbage a job? Do you know what people say about you? That we wasted money raising a child who doesn't care about success." "I don't care about your version of success," I said, meeting his stare. The silence after that was heavy. Claire broke it first. "Dad, maybe he's right. Not everyone can handle pressure. Some people are meant for simpler lives." I stood up. "Enjoy dinner." As I walked toward the door, my father's voice followed me, low, seething. "Don't test me, Owen. You've already taken enough from this family." I paused, turned slightly, and asked, "What exactly have I taken?" He didn't answer. When I got home that night, the envelope was gone. I tore the place apart. Drawers, shelves, everything. Nothing. Whoever took it knew exactly where to look. I called Martin, panicked. He told me to calm down and come to his shop in the morning. When I arrived, he was waiting with a serious expression and a man I'd never seen before. Tall, late 40s, wearing a brown jacket. "Owen," Martin said, "this is Samuel. He's an attorney. He used to work with your grandfather." Samuel nodded. "Your grandfather anticipated this. I believe you found part of what he left for you." He reached into his briefcase and handed me another envelope, smaller, older, with the same crest. This was meant to reach you once you turned 30. Your father intercepted it. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, dated years ago. Owen, it began. If you are reading this, it means my faith in your father was misplaced. He has likely told you that I left him everything. That is not true. I founded Lawson International for family, not ego. You will know when the time is right to act. Trust your instincts, and trust no one wearing our name until you've seen their true colors. At the bottom, there was an address. Samuel looked at me. That's a private storage unit registered under your grandfather's old company. He set it up before he passed. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. The fog of helplessness replaced by a spark of clarity. But before I could say anything, my phone buzzed. It was Claire. A text. Hope you enjoyed dinner, Owen. Dad says you'll regret the attitude. Don't push him. I didn't reply, because at that moment, I realized something my family had never expected. I wasn't scared anymore. I was done being the useless one, and I was going to find out exactly what my grandfather wanted me to see. The address on the letter led to a part of town I hadn't visited in years, an industrial zone full of storage facilities, factories, and shipping yards. I drove there early one morning before work, the sky still gray and heavy with fog. The unit number was written in my grandfather's familiar pen, 37B. I parked outside, my heart pounding like I was about to uncover something forbidden. When I unlocked the door, the scent of dust and old metal hit me. Inside were shelves lined with file boxes, a few old crates, and a metal cabinet with my grandfather's initials carved into it. It looked untouched for decades. I spent hours digging through documents, old company records, blueprints, contracts. Most of it didn't make much sense to me until I found a thick folder marked Founders' Rights. Inside were papers showing that my grandfather had set up a hidden clause in the company's founding agreement, one that allowed the majority control of Lawson International to revert to his designated heir if the current management failed to meet certain ethical standards or misused family assets. And the kicker? The clause was still active. There were receipts, financial ledgers, and correspondences showing that my father had been quietly funneling company money into shell corporations, using Claire's signature in several cases. There were emails between lawyers discussing reallocation of assets and erasure of redundant ownership records. My grandfather had left everything documented. At the very bottom of the stack was a handwritten note that looked newer than the rest. It said, "If Owen finds this, contact Reynolds." There was a phone number. Reynolds turned out to be another lawyer, one who'd been forced out of the company years ago under mysterious circumstances. When I called, his tone was calm but cautious. "You're Charles Lawson's grandson?" he asked. "Yes," I said. There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. "I was wondering when this day would come. You'd better come see me in person." We met at his office that afternoon. He was an older man, white-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who notices everything but says little. When I handed him the documents, he went through them one by one, his brow tightening. Finally, he leaned back and said, "Your grandfather was smarter than people gave him credit for. He knew your father would abuse his power. So, what does this mean for me?" I asked. He folded his hands. "It means you're the legal heir to Lawson International. Everything, the estate, the trusts, the company, is yours. But claiming it won't be easy. Your father has buried every trace of this will. If he finds out you know, he'll do everything to destroy it, and you." I remember just sitting there, trying to process it all. For years I'd been told I was worthless, that the company was none of my business, that I was lucky to even be tolerated. And now I was hearing that the entire empire my father built his identity around, the company he'd used to humiliate me my whole life, technically belonged to me. Reynolds must have seen the look on my face, because he said quietly, "Owen, this isn't about revenge. Your grandfather wanted the company to stay in the right hands. You'll have to prove you're ready for that responsibility." I nodded, but deep down, something darker had already started to form. I didn't want to just inherit it. I wanted them to feel what they'd done, the humiliation, the dismissal, the years of mockery disguised as parenting. Still, I said nothing. I took the documents, thanked him, and left. That night, my phone rang again. It was my mother. "Where have you been?" she asked sharply. "Your father's been trying to reach you." "I've been busy," I said flatly. She sighed dramatically. "Busy doing what?" "We're worried about you. You've been acting strange lately, paranoid, secretive. Claire said you were snooping around the company's old offices. Is that true? I wasn't snooping, I said. Owen, she said, lowering her voice. Listen to me carefully. Whatever fantasy you're chasing, drop it. Your father has enough on his plate without dealing with your nonsense. You should be grateful he's even willing to let you stay part of this family after everything you've pulled. After everything I've pulled? I said, incredulous. You mean after everything you've hidden? Her voice turned icy. Watch your tone. Then she hung up. That night, my apartment was broken into. The lock wasn't forced. Someone had a key. Nothing was stolen except one thing, the folder from the storage unit. The rest of the place was untouched. I found muddy footprints near the window, and the glass coffee table had a faint scratch across it, like someone had rested a briefcase there. I didn't bother calling the police. I already knew who was behind it. For the next few days, I didn't go home. I stayed with Martin, who insisted I sleep in the back of the shop. They're escalating, he said. Your father's desperate. He was right. 2 days later, I got an email from the company's HR department again, this time addressed formally. It said, Mr. Lawson, this is to inform you that due to recent behavior damaging to the family's reputation, your parents have decided to withdraw all financial support, including housing and insurance benefits. The irony made me laugh. They'd cut me off from money I never had. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. Additionally, your presence at any family-owned property is now considered trespassing under current policy. They'd officially disowned me. That same afternoon, I got a call from Claire. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hey, she said, sounding unusually calm. I heard you've been going through a rough patch. I didn't reply. Owen, look, I don't know what's gotten into you. Dad's just trying to protect the family. You know how much pressure he's under. Why don't you come by the house? We'll talk. Just us. I should have known better, but part of me, the part that still wanted to believe my sister had some humanity left, said yes. When I arrived, the house felt eerily quiet. The staff wasn't around, the curtains were drawn, and the air smelled faintly of my father's cologne. Claire greeted me in the foyer, her expression unreadable. Dad's in the study, she said softly. He just wants to clear the air. I followed her down the hall, each step heavier than the last. The study door was closed. She knocked twice and opened it. My father sat behind his massive oak desk, hands folded. On the table was a manila envelope, my envelope. Sit down, he said. I didn't move. Sit, he repeated more sharply. Reluctantly, I did. He picked up the envelope and held it up. This. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Dangerous for who? I asked. For you, he said, his tone low and deliberate. You're playing with things you don't understand. This company, this family, doesn't belong to you. It never did. It belongs to whoever my grandfather chose, I said. He laughed, a slow, bitter laugh. Your grandfather was a sentimental fool. He didn't understand what it takes to build something lasting. I did. I made Lawson International what it is today. You stole it, I said quietly. His expression hardened. I preserved it. You think a naive boy like you could run an empire like this? You fix engines, for God's sake. I stood. You can't bury this forever. He smiled thinly. Oh, I already have. That's when he nodded toward the door. 2 men stepped inside, both large, both silent. One of them held a small USB drive. My father looked at me and said, Everything you found, every document, every letter, gone. We've cleaned it all. Digital backups, too. And you, Owen, you're finished. He slid a paper across the desk. Sign this. It states you renounce any claim to the family assets and agree to stay away from company property. In return, I'll make sure you're comfortable. I stared at the paper. No. He sighed. I thought you might say that. He gestured to one of the men. The guy stepped forward, grabbed my shoulder, and forced me back into the chair. My father leaned in close, his voice cold and almost amused. You always thought you were better than your role. But you were born to be nothing. That's all you'll ever be. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I wrenched free and stormed out before they could stop me. Claire followed me to the driveway, calling my name. Owen, wait. I turned around, and for a split second, I saw something that almost looked like guilt in her eyes. But then she said quietly, You shouldn't have come back here. Did you know? I asked. About the will? About what Dad's done. She hesitated. It's complicated. I laughed bitterly. No, it's not. It's theft. She stepped closer. You don't understand what he's capable of. Neither do you, I said, then got in my car and drove away. When I got home, I found my apartment door open again. This time, there was a letter on my kitchen table, one of my own, the letter from my grandfather, ripped in half. No signature, no message, just a business card placed on top. It was from Reynolds, and written on the back in black ink were 5 words that made my blood run cold. They got to me. Be careful. That was the night I realized my family wasn't just cruel. They were dangerous. And whatever came next, I'd have to fight them on their own terms. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to be alone. The next morning after finding Reynolds' message, I sat in my kitchen staring at the shredded letter, my mind blank. The silence felt heavier than any noise I'd ever known. No calls, no messages, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the lingering smell of cold coffee. I tried to reach Reynolds. His number went straight to voicemail. I emailed him, nothing. Then I called the law office. The receptionist told me he'd taken an unexpected leave of absence. Her tone said everything she wasn't allowed to. By evening, I found out what that meant. A news alert popped up on my phone. Local attorney found dead in apparent accident. No details, no photos, just a short paragraph saying his car had lost control and gone off the road. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't need to be told twice. It wasn't an accident. My father's reach was long, and he had always believed that fear was the best tool of control. For most of my life, I'd thought that meant emotional manipulation. Now I knew better. He didn't just play dirty, he erased problems. And in his eyes, I'd just become one. The following days blurred together. I didn't go to work. Martin called several times, but I couldn't answer. What would I even say? That my family might have had someone killed? That the same people who'd smiled for Christmas photos could destroy a man for knowing too much? I started sleeping on the couch with my shoes still on because I didn't trust the locks anymore. Then one night, around 2 a.m., there was a knock at my door. 3 sharp knocks. I froze. It wasn't the police. They'd call first. It wasn't a neighbor. They'd text. I waited, heart pounding, the sound echoing again. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a wrench I'd left on the counter from fixing a chair. Owen, a voice said through the door. It's me. It was Martin. When I opened the door, he looked exhausted, his face pale under the porch light. You're not safe here, he said immediately. Pack a bag. You're coming with me. I didn't ask how he knew. I just obeyed. He took me to a cabin about an hour outside the city, one he used during fishing trips, isolated and surrounded by pine trees. When we got there, I finally broke. I told him everything. The will, the threats, the break-ins, the meeting with my father, Reynolds' death. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with every detail. When I finished, he said quietly, Your father's not just corrupt. He's scared. That makes him unpredictable. I leaned back in the old wooden chair, rubbing my temples. What am I supposed to do, Martin? He's erased everything. Every document, every file. Even if I wanted to fight him, I've got nothing left. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he went to the old fireplace, pulled out a tin box from behind a loose brick, and set it on the table. Inside were a few memory drives, old documents, and an envelope. I've been keeping this for years, he said. Your grandfather gave it to me before he died. Told me to hold on to it until someone came looking. I blinked. You knew? I didn't know what it was for, he said. But I had a feeling it would matter one day. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were scanned copies of the same documents I'd found, plus one I hadn't seen before. It was a notarized letter from my grandfather's attorney, confirming that any revision to his will would require a secondary witness signature from him, and that no such revision had ever been made. In other words, my father's version of the will was legally void. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked quietly. Because if I did, you'd have gone straight to your father, Martin said. And you weren't ready then. He was right. Still, knowing I had the truth didn't feel like power, it felt like a burden. I couldn't take on a man like my father alone. He had lawyers, influence, money, and I had nothing but a pile of papers and a mechanic's paycheck. The next few weeks were a blur of hiding and fear. I kept my phone off most of the time, used cash only, and stayed off social media. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my father had cut ties with me entirely, told everyone I was mentally unstable, possibly addicted, and needed professional help. The smear campaign had begun. Then, one afternoon, while driving back from town, I saw a familiar car parked near the cabin. Black sedan, tinted windows, the same kind I'd seen before outside my apartment. I slowed down, pretending not to notice, then took the long way around. By the time I returned an hour later, it was gone. That night, Martin told me something I didn't expect. "You can't stay here forever," he said. "He'll find you eventually. You need to think long-term." Long-term? I asked bitterly. Like what? Changing my name and living in the woods? He met my eyes. No. Like taking back what's yours. But you can't fight him head-on. You'll lose. That stuck with me. I spent days turning it over in my mind, staring at the flickering light from the fireplace, thinking about every word my father had ever said to me. Useless, disappointment, ungrateful. Each one had shaped me into something small, afraid, invisible. But sitting there, with those documents spread across the table, I realized something else. Maybe my greatest advantage was that he still saw me that way. If he thought I was weak, he'd never see me coming. That thought became the seed of a plan. I didn't know what it would look like yet, but I knew it had to start with patience. I began by quietly gathering everything I could. I went through old contacts, people who'd worked under my grandfather, former accountants, drivers, secretaries, anyone who might still hold fragments of the company's past. Most of them had either retired or disappeared, but one name kept coming up: Eleanor Shaw. She'd been my grandfather's personal assistant for 20 years before my father took over. Finding her took weeks. She was living in a small coastal town, long retired. When I called her, she hesitated but eventually agreed to meet. "If you're Charles's grandson," she said softly, "I suppose you have a right to know what really happened." When I arrived at her cottage, she greeted me with watery eyes and trembling hands. "You look like him," she said. "He'd be proud you came." She told me things I'd never heard. How my father had started manipulating the board right after my grandfather's stroke, forging signatures, moving assets, and convincing Claire to back him in exchange for her future inheritance. "He made it look legal," she said. "But it wasn't." Then she handed me a small key. "Your grandfather had a second safety deposit box. Only I and his lawyer knew. If Reynolds is gone, you're the only one left who can open it." The box was located in a private bank downtown, under a pseudonym, C. Harding. It took every ounce of courage I had to walk into that building, heart pounding, expecting security to drag me out at any second. But when they verified the key and ID, the clerk simply nodded and escorted me to a small room. Inside the box were 2 flash drives, a bundle of letters, and a worn photograph of my grandfather holding me as a child. Written on the back were 5 words: "Don't let them rewrite history." I sat there staring at that photo, fighting back the sting in my chest. It hit me then. My grandfather had seen this coming. He'd known what my father and sister would become, and he'd left breadcrumbs for me to follow. When I got back to the cabin that night, I plugged in one of the drives. It contained digital copies of every original document, company share certificate, and notarized statement of ownership, all time-stamped and authenticated. Everything my father had tried to destroy. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not out of joy, but relief. I finally had proof. But I also knew I couldn't use it yet. If I went public, my father would bury it under lawsuits and threats before the ink even dried. I had to be smarter. So I waited, planned, observed. I went back to work at the repair shop, acted like nothing had happened. I stopped contacting anyone connected to the company. I made myself boring, predictable, forgettable, the same useless Owen they always thought I was. And slowly it worked. My father stopped sending people to follow me. The family's attention drifted back to Claire, who was now preparing for her official appointment as CEO. Publicly, they had already erased me. But privately, I was learning how to fight back. Every night, after work, I'd sit at my small desk, studying company bylaws, learning about corporate takeovers, stock transfers, inheritance disputes. I watched legal lectures online until 2 in the morning, took notes, built spreadsheets, cross-referenced data from the drives. My father thought I'd disappeared into mediocrity again, but really, I was learning how to dismantle his empire one clause at a time. Still, the loneliness cut deep. There were nights I'd sit outside the cabin and wonder if it was even worth it. If I should just disappear and let them keep their poison legacy. Then I'd remember Reynolds, my grandfather, the years of laughter at my expense. And I'd whisper to myself, not yet. The day I saw Claire's face on the cover of Forbes' Next Gen Leaders was the day something inside me clicked into place. The headline read, "Claire Lawson, the future of a billion-dollar dynasty." I looked at that magazine for a long time before saying quietly, "We'll see about that." Because what my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their empire was built on a lie. And I finally had the truth. The next few months were quiet, almost too quiet. My father believed he'd won, and that silence gave me space to rebuild. Every morning, I woke up before dawn, drove to the repair shop, worked with my hands until sunset, then came home and worked with my mind until midnight. I had no one cheering me on, no safety net, but for the first time, that didn't bother me. Solitude had become my strength. I started taking night classes at the community college, business law, corporate finance, ethics, estate planning. I didn't tell anyone, not even Martin. I sat in the back of the class, took notes like my life depended on it, and left before anyone could ask questions. I learned how board votes worked, how ownership could shift silently through stock distribution, how trusts could be weaponized or dismantled. The same tools my father had used to bury me, I was learning how to turn them back against him. And slowly, my life started to change. The repair shop grew busier. Word spread that we could fix what others couldn't, and I started taking private contracts, generators, machinery, custom fabrication. I saved every cent. By the end of the year, I had enough to rent a small warehouse on the edge of town. I quit my job at the shop, with Martin's blessing, and started my own company, Lomax Engineering. I didn't use the Lawson name. Not yet. At first, it was just me, one man, a few tools, and a secondhand truck. But business came fast. Local factories needed affordable equipment repair, and my reputation from the shop followed me. Within 6 months, I had 4 employees. Within a year, I had 12. We didn't just fix machines, we rebuilt them better. It was funny, the same skill my father mocked me for, the one he said would never lead anywhere, became the foundation of something real. Something mine. The first real break came from a logistics company called Halverson Freight. One of their warehouses had a power failure that shut down their operations. I drove out at midnight with 2 of my guys, worked through the storm, and had them running again by morning. The owner, a man named Derek, shook my hand and said, "You saved us. Anything you ever need, you call me." That sentence would end up changing everything. A few months later, Derek invited me to a regional business conference, a small event, nothing fancy, just local entrepreneurs sharing contacts. I almost didn't go, but something in me said I should. That's where I met Amelia Torres, a financial consultant with a background in corporate auditing. She was sharp, direct, and didn't flinch when I told her my story. "You're sitting on a gold mine," she said after I showed her the digital files from my grandfather's drives. "But you're treating it like a time bomb. You need to use this strategically, not emotionally." That's when I learned what she meant by leverage. Amelia helped me set up a holding company under a different name, independent, untraceable to the Lawsons. Through her connections, we quietly began acquiring small shares in Lawson International through shell investors. My father had spread ownership across dozens of dummy accounts to keep control, but that decentralization worked both ways. By the end of the first year, I owned nearly 8% of the company, silently, legally, and without my father having a clue. At the same time, Lomax Engineering was expanding. Derek introduced me to other clients, transport companies, manufacturers, even a defense contractor that needed prototype development. I worked nonstop. I hired specialists, upgraded equipment, reinvested every profit. One day, I came home to find a letter from my old college, the same one I dropped out of years ago because my parents refused to help pay tuition. It was an invitation to speak at an alumni event for emerging business owners. The irony made me laugh. I didn't go, but I framed the letter. Meanwhile, the Lawson family empire was showing cracks. My father had pushed for rapid expansion, chasing prestige projects with poor returns. Claire, now officially CEO, was doing endless press interviews, presenting herself as the face of modern leadership. But internally, things were falling apart. I knew because Amelia still had contacts inside their finance department, people who whispered about missing funds and questionable transfers. I didn't act yet. I just watched, waited, gathered information. During that time, I started changing, not just professionally, but personally. I no longer carried myself like the beaten-down son hiding in the corner at family dinners. I spoke with confidence. I walked into meetings with presence. When clients asked about my background, I simply said, "My grandfather taught me how to build things that last." It wasn't a lie. Then came the day that confirmed everything I'd been working toward. Amelia called me one morning, voice trembling slightly with excitement. "Owen, you need to see this," she said. She sent over a financial report, Lawson International's quarterly filing. Their shares had dipped 9% overnight after a failed merger. Investors were panicking. "That's your window," she said. "If you want to take control, this is how it starts." We started small, moving through intermediaries, buying up more stock as panic spread. Within 3 weeks, I controlled 15%. Within 2 months, 21. That's when my father noticed. He must have seen the new investor names in the shareholder reports because suddenly, Lawson International announced an emergency restructuring. It was obvious he was trying to consolidate power before anyone could challenge him. But it was too late. At that point, I wasn't the same man who'd stood in the back of that Yale auditorium. I had my own company, my own money, my own network. I wasn't the useless one anymore. I was a ghost in his system, a name he didn't recognize that was slowly buying back everything he'd stolen. I started dressing the part too. Gone were the secondhand suits. I bought tailored ones, subtle, clean, no labels. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. Not because of the clothes, but because of the man behind the eyes. Every small victory brought a quiet satisfaction. I didn't celebrate publicly. I didn't post about it or flaunt it. I kept everything quiet, deliberate, methodical. Then came the moment that changed everything again. One afternoon, while reviewing filings with Amelia, we found something buried deep in the company's archives, a record of a special meeting held 3 years after my grandfather's death. The attendees were my father, 2 board members, and Claire. The purpose? To reaffirm control of family holdings. But the meeting had one fatal flaw. No proper notice was filed with shareholders, which made every decision made there legally invalid. In other words, the transfer of full authority to my father, the event that started all of this, was null. That meant, technically, I could challenge it. But to do that, I'd have to expose myself, go public, reveal who I was. I wasn't ready yet, but the seed was planted. Around that time, I started getting invitations again from people who used to ignore me. Networking events, investment dinners, charity galas. I ignored most of them until one invitation caught my eye. It was from Lawson International. The subject line read, "Annual Gala, Honoring Our Legacy." The same event I'd been mocked at years ago. I almost deleted it. Then I read the tagline. Hosted by CEO Claire Lawson and Chairman Charles Lawson. Something in me clicked. I didn't RSVP right away. I just closed the laptop and sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the skyline. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd built, and everything they still believed was theirs. Then I whispered, time to remind them who they forgot. Because the boy they used to mock didn't exist anymore. The man who replaced him, the one they'd underestimated into oblivion, was ready. The next morning, I wired a transfer. Enough to buy a controlling interest through proxy shareholders. By the time my father's accountants noticed the movement, the paperwork would already be filed. And in the shadows of my quiet rise, I could almost hear my grandfather's voice again. Legacy isn't what you're given. It's what you protect. Soon, I would protect it and take back everything they'd built on lies. The gala was held at the same luxury hotel downtown, the one where my father once humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. Only this time, I wasn't arriving as the awkward, forgotten son in a hand-me-down suit. I was the invisible shareholder who owned more of Lawson International than anyone in that room. I arrived in a charcoal gray suit, no tie, quiet confidence. No one recognized me at first. The valet took my keys with a polite, "Good evening, sir," and I smiled. The air outside shimmered with the sound of camera flashes and laughter. My father loved events like this. They fed his ego. Claire, too, basked in attention like it was oxygen. Inside, everything looked the same as it had years ago. Chandeliers, champagne, and perfectly staged smiles. My father stood near the stage, shaking hands, his laugh loud enough to dominate the room. Claire hovered beside him, radiant in a white evening gown, surrounded by executives. They were untouchable. Or so they thought. The presentation began. My father stepped up to the podium, his voice booming with pride. Tonight, he said, we celebrate not just our company, but our legacy, the Lawson name that has stood for integrity and excellence for generations. I nearly laughed out loud. He went on to praise Claire's leadership, announcing a historic merger that would, in his words, secure our family's future for decades. As applause erupted, I pulled out my phone and checked the email Amelia had just sent. Confirmation of share registration. It was official. My proxies now held 51% of Lawson International. The company my father claimed to own didn't legally belong to him anymore. Amelia had warned me this moment would come fast and messy. Once it's filed, she said, he'll find out within hours. If you're going to make a move, do it immediately. Hit him where it hurts, his pride. That's exactly what I planned to do. I waited until the applause died down. Then, while the next speaker approached the podium, I stepped forward toward the cluster of board members at the front. One of them, Mr. Doyle, my father's oldest ally, noticed me first. His eyes widened. Owen, my father turned mid-sentence. For a brief second, he froze. What are you doing here? He demanded. The microphone was still on. The crowd fell silent. I smiled politely. Just here to celebrate the Lawson legacy. Claire looked nervous. My father, irritated, forced a laugh. Well, isn't this something? My son decided to join us. It's good to see you finally take an interest in real business. Oh, I've been very interested, I said evenly. In fact, I've spent the past 2 years learning a lot about business. Contracts, trusts, board voting rights. A few people chuckled, thinking it was some kind of family banter. My father gave me a tight smile. That's adorable, Owen. Maybe one day you'll understand what it takes to. Actually, I interrupted, pulling a small folder from my jacket. I think I already do. I handed it to Mr. Doyle. Those are the new shareholder reports filed this afternoon. Effective immediately, Lawson International has a new majority owner. The room went dead quiet. My father blinked. What? I nodded. You heard me. As of 3:42 p.m., control of the company officially transferred to my holding firm, Orisis Industries. He laughed, but it came out strained. That's impossible. I shrugged. You can verify it yourself. The registry was filed through the state exchange and approved by the commission. Mr. Doyle was already flipping through the documents, his face draining of color. Claire looked like she'd seen a ghost. Dad, she whispered. The silence stretched like an iron chain. Then, finally, my father turned toward me, his voice low but seething. You think this makes you powerful? You have no idea how this world works. Maybe not, I said, but I know how you work. And I've spent my whole life watching you destroy everything decent our family ever stood for. So, yeah, I think I finally learned enough. The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Investors, journalists, employees, everyone realizing that the useless son had just dethroned the patriarch. Security began to move, but Claire stopped them with a shaky hand. Dad, don't, she said under her breath. He ignored her. This is a mistake. You think paperwork makes you a man? You've humiliated yourself in front of everyone. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. No, Dad. I just reminded them who actually owns this company, and who never should have. That's when Amelia's timing hit perfectly. The ballroom doors opened, and a courier walked in with a manila envelope marked urgent. He handed it to the event coordinator, who passed it straight to my father. It's from the state corporate registry, she murmured. He tore it open, scanning the document, then froze. His face turned gray. Claire peeked over his shoulder and whispered, It's real. For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. Then my father slammed the paper on the podium and barked, This means nothing. The board still answers to me. No, they don't, said a voice behind him. It was Mr. Doyle. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. Under the bylaws, the majority shareholder has full voting rights and final say over corporate appointments. My father spun around. You spineless. I resign, Doyle said simply. Effective immediately. The other 2 directors followed suit. Claire's expression shifted from shock to panic. Dad, but it was too late. The dominoes were already falling. I turned toward the audience, every eye on me. From this point forward, I said, Lawson International will no longer be run by greed, intimidation, or family favoritism. It will be rebuilt the way my grandfather intended. People began clapping. Not everyone, but enough that it felt real. Genuine. My father just stood there, motionless, gripping the edge of the podium. The veins in his temple bulged. I could almost see the moment it sank in, that the son he'd mocked for being useless had outplayed him completely. Claire's face hardened. "You think this makes you better than us?" she hissed, stepping closer. "You're just like him." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But at least I learned from his mistakes." I walked off the stage without looking back. The applause followed me all the way to the lobby. Outside, the night air was cool and silent. Amelia was waiting by the car, smiling faintly. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied, glancing back at the glowing hotel windows. "I just started, because I knew this wasn't over." My father would fight, claw, and twist every law he could to take it back. Claire would side with him. But this time, I wasn't fighting from the shadows. I was fighting from the top. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. My phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number. It read, "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've awakened." I smiled faintly. "We'll see." Because for the first time in my life, the power was mine, and I had no intention of letting go. The fallout came fast, faster than even I expected. Within 48 hours of the gala, every business outlet in the city was running the same headline. Lawson International under new ownership after surprise takeover. My phone exploded with calls from journalists, lawyers, and board members who suddenly wanted to reconnect. Amelia handled the chaos with a calm efficiency that made her look almost supernatural. "Let them talk," she said. "Your father's power was built on perception. The moment the illusion breaks, he's nothing." And she was right. By Monday morning, half the company's senior staff had tendered their resignations. The stock that had once soared under my father's control was now stabilizing under mine. Cautious investors liked the change. For the first time in decades, Lawson International was operating transparently. Meanwhile, my father disappeared from public life entirely. The man who had spent his entire existence chasing the spotlight suddenly had nowhere to stand. He tried to challenge the transfer in court, of course, hired an army of lawyers, filed motion after motion. But the evidence was airtight. Every fraudulent signature, every hidden account, every illegal restructuring meeting was documented in my grandfather's files. I still remember sitting in the courtroom the day the judge read the verdict. "Based on the presented evidence," she said, "control of Lawson International and all related assets rightfully belongs to Mr. Owen Lawson." My father didn't even look at me. He just sat there, stone-faced, while Claire's hands trembled beside him. When the judge left, the reporters swarmed us. He stood, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll regret this," he said. I met his eyes. "No, Dad. I just corrected it." That was the last time we ever spoke. Within months, the family estate, the mansion where I'd grown up being called useless, was repossessed. Not by me, but by the bank. My father had mortgaged it years ago to fund his failed expansions. Without his corporate income, he couldn't pay a cent back. He moved into a small coastal property owned by one of his old associates, out of the public eye. Claire tried to reinvent herself, first as a consultant, then as a philanthropist. But her name was poisoned now. Investors refused to work with her, and every time she tried to step into the spotlight again, her father's scandals followed. I didn't gloat. Not publicly. But when I read the article titled, "Once Golden Lawson Legacy Tarnished by Family Scandal," I won't pretend it didn't feel like closure. As for me, I spent the next year rebuilding everything the right way. We restructured the company, implemented ethics reforms, rehired workers my father had fired for speaking up. Profits rose. So did morale. For the first time, people actually believed in the Lawson name again, not out of fear, but out of pride. One evening, I returned to the company's old headquarters, my grandfather's original office, long abandoned. The building was quiet, the air thick with dust and memory. I walked to his old desk, brushed my hand across the worn surface, and placed the family crest, the one my father had removed years ago, back where it belonged. I stood there for a long time, thinking about the boy I used to be. The one who sat in the back row at his sister's graduation, the one who swallowed every insult, the one who believed he'd never be enough. That boy had died the moment I opened that sealed envelope. And the man who replaced him had built something stronger from the ashes. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. Owen, I don't expect forgiveness. You won. You always wanted respect. I see that now. Maybe your grandfather saw it first. Whatever you do, protect the name. Don't become me. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I burned the letter in the fireplace that night. Not out of hatred, but to let it end where it began, in silence. The next morning, I stood on the balcony of the new headquarters. The skyline stretched endlessly ahead, sunlight reflecting off the windows like glass fire. Amelia joined me with 2 mugs of coffee and a faint smile. Feels different now, doesn't it? She said. Yeah, I replied. It finally feels right. She raised her mug. To your grandfather? I nodded. To the rightful heir. And as I looked out over the city, the empire that once rejected me, I realized that the revenge was never really about taking what they had. It was about proving I never needed their permission to begin with. The Lawson name was clean again. The company was thriving. And the boy they called useless? He owned it all. I'm Ryan, 34, and I've spent the last decade learning that family doesn't always mean warmth or support or even respect. Sometimes, it's just the people who share your last name and think that gives them free rein to treat you however they like. I didn't always feel this way, of course. There was a time I craved their approval, hung on to every little compliment, every rare moment when they treated me like I mattered. But over the years, I learned to manage my expectations. Or at least, I thought I had. This Easter, I volunteered to host dinner. Again, not because I thought things would be different, but because my mom guilt-tripped me with her usual, "You have the nicest kitchen and dining space, Ryan. Your sister's place is too small, and you know how tired I get." It was the same song every holiday, and I always gave in. I'd spent 3 days deep cleaning the house, prepping the guest rooms, and cooking dishes I knew everyone liked. Yes, even my brother's weird lactose-free, gluten-free casserole. I didn't complain when they showed up 2 hours late. I smiled, hugged everyone, and tried to shake off the familiar heaviness in my chest that always settled in around my family. My mom arrived with her signature perfume cloud and a passive-aggressive remark about how the driveway was so steep, I thought I'd need climbing gear. My brother Matt, 2 years younger and somehow still treated like the family's crown jewel, walked in behind her, already scrolling on his phone. His wife, Amber, didn't even say hi before plopping her designer bag on the entry table and asking if the guest bathroom had real hand towels or just paper. My sister Lacey was last to arrive, wearing a floral sundress and a fake smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We hadn't spoken much since the Christmas blow-up, but I still set out her favorite drink and a vegan option for dinner. Dinner was tense. Like always. I played host, refilling water glasses, running back and forth to the kitchen, making sure everything was warm, replenishing bread baskets, and pretending not to notice the whispered conversations happening without me. Amber had a loud laugh, one of those theatrical, attention-demanding cackles, and she used it freely every time Lacey made some snide joke. Mom's eyes would flit toward me whenever something awkward came up, but she never said anything. She never had to. Her silence always spoke louder than her words. When I finally sat down, after ensuring everyone had full plates and second helpings, there was this beat of silence. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would acknowledge the effort. That maybe my mother would soften, say thank you, or even just smile at me like I belonged at the table. But instead, she fixed me with that cold, tight-lipped stare she always reserved for when I disappointed her. And then she said it, loud and clear. "You should be used to being left out by now. It's what you're best at." I didn't move. For a second, I wondered if I'd imagined it. But Matt laughed, this low, smug chuckle, and my stomach dropped. No one looked shocked. No one said, "Hey, that was uncalled for." Not even Lacey. She just stirred her drink and looked away. I blinked. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I stood up, calmly, pushed in my chair, and walked back into the kitchen like I'd forgotten something. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, scrolling past texts from coworkers and reminders about deadlines. I found the thread with my lawyer, Michelle, the same one who helped me manage the transfer of the summer house last year. We'd been in talks about signing the deed over to my parents as a gift, partly for tax reasons and partly because I thought, maybe stupidly, that it would make them proud. They loved that house. It had been in the family for generations, but I was the one who'd bought it back after it was foreclosed during a rough patch. No one helped, not even a loan or a kind word. But when I'd gotten back on my feet, I did it quietly, without fanfare. I never asked for anything in return. I opened Michelle's last message about the deed transfer and typed, "Please cancel. Do not proceed with the house transfer. I'll explain later." Then I locked my phone and took a deep breath. The hum of voices from the dining room drifted in, Matt bragging about his promotion, Mom listing her health complaints like a grocery list. I didn't go back in right away. I leaned against the counter and stared out the window, watching the garden I'd planted in spring start to bloom again. It felt like a different world out there. Peaceful, quiet, unbothered. When I finally returned to the table, no one even noticed I'd been gone. The conversation had moved on to summer plans, and I heard Matt say, "Once the house is in Mom and Dad's name, we can finally fix that deck, right?" My mom nodded, beaming like it was already hers. Lacey looked up from her phone just long enough to say, "You know, it's wild how Ryan finally did something right." That was the moment. The moment I realized they didn't just take me for granted, they'd already decided I was a footnote in my own story, someone to use and discard. And I had spent years, trying to earn scraps of approval from people who would never give it, who saw my efforts not as kindness, but as weakness, as obligation. I didn't correct them. I didn't tell them the house wasn't theirs yet. I just let them keep talking. Let them plan renovations and furniture upgrades. Let them bask in the fantasy they'd built around taking something from me without ever acknowledging what I'd done to get it. Because I had a different plan now. One that didn't involve being left out. One that would finally remind them that I wasn't someone they could overlook anymore. And as they laughed and toasted to a future that was never going to happen, I just smiled and waited. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of stress, no. It was a calm sort of wakefulness. The kind you feel when you know a storm is coming, but you've already boarded the windows and stocked the pantry. I walked through my house in the quiet, barefoot on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself last fall. Every corner of this place held some memory, some blood, sweat, and solitude. I thought about how I'd worked 2 jobs for a year straight after the foreclosure just to save enough to buy the summer home back from the auction. How I'd sat in that cold lawyer's office, signing papers with hands that still shook from overwork. Not a single one of them showed up to help. But the second the landscaping looked good enough for Instagram, they started calling it ours. For months, my mom had been saying things like, "When you sign that house over, we'll finally feel like the family's back together." She'd needle me about it during phone calls and guilt me in front of the others at dinner. "It's your duty," she'd say. "You're the oldest." And when I agreed, reluctantly, to begin the paperwork with my lawyer, you'd have thought I'd handed them the deed in a gift-wrapped box. They were already treating it like a foregone conclusion. But not anymore. The next morning, I got a message from Michelle, confirmed. "The deed remains in your name. No transfer will occur. Happy to discuss details whenever you're ready." I stared at the text for a long moment before replying simply, "Perfect. Thank you." I added a lock screen note to remind myself to change the access code to the summer house gate. And then, because I'm not above a little flair, I scheduled a maintenance crew to go up there that weekend. Not to work on the deck, but to install a brand new security system and a digital lock. One I controlled remotely. One they didn't know existed yet. I didn't tell anyone. I let them carry on with their group chat, when I wasn't included in, of course, where they exchanged furniture ideas, Pinterest boards, and Mom's wish list for the house that wasn't even theirs. Matt suggested turning the back bedroom into a man cave for football weekends. Lacey wanted a reading nook. Amber said we could rent it out on Airbnb when no one was using it. The we in that sentence almost made me laugh out loud. I stayed quiet. I watched. I waited. 2 weeks later, I got the invitation. A glittery, overly designed event titled Family Summer Kickoff Weekend. Hosted, apparently, at my house. I read through it like it was some kind of parody. Poolside brunch, grill night, family trivia games, and our big "Thank you, Ryan" toast. As if they'd planned an entire event around a man they hadn't even bothered to include in the organizing. The RSVP button was already filled in with "Attending, Ryan." I almost didn't go. Part of me just wanted to change the locks and leave them to figure it out on the porch. But something in me, something deeper, wanted to see it. To witness the moment it all fell apart. Not for the drama. Not for vengeance. But for closure. Because I needed them to know. Not assume, not guess, but truly understand what it meant to cut someone out of their own life and how little they deserved to be part of mine. The day of the kickoff weekend, I didn't show up early. I waited. I knew they'd get there first. I knew they'd have a key from the old lock. Matt had copied mine a while ago, without asking. But when they got there, the new system would stop them at the gate. The one with the new keypad and camera. It was almost noon when my phone rang. Matt. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom. Ignored. Then a family group chat ping, one I hadn't seen activity in for months. Ryan, the gate isn't working. Call us. We're standing here with groceries and towels and everything. I sipped my coffee. Took a screenshot. Saved it to a folder labeled Receipts. Then came Amber's text. You could have said you canceled the trip. That's just cruel. Lacey finally sent a voice message. Her tone was icy. If this is some kind of punishment, it's really childish. We've all been planning this for weeks. It's not just your house. It's a family place. That was the final straw. I opened the group chat for the first time in over a year. And I typed, no, it's not. It's my property. My money bought it. My signature holds the deed. Not one of you helped me reclaim it when it was lost. Not one of you paid a dime. You just waited until it was convenient to claim it as yours. That ends today. You excluded me at every turn. So here's your reminder. I don't owe you space in my life. Not even a vacation home. Enjoy the drive back. Then I turned my phone off. I don't know what they did after that. I assume they stood there, mouths open, phones in hand, looking around for someone to blame. Maybe they argued. Maybe they turned on each other. Or maybe, for once, they sat in silence and thought about how they treated the one person who had never stopped showing up for them until now. But that's not where this ends. Because the fallout from that day, well, let's just say it wasn't limited to one summer weekend. I didn't check my phone until the next morning. I wasn't in a rush, after all. What were they going to do? Yell at me? Again? Demand an apology? I'd spent years walking on eggshells around people who saw kindness as currency and used guilt like a scalpel. This time, I wasn't going to be the one chasing them for peace. I brewed my coffee, opened the window to let the breeze in, and only after I'd sat down at my kitchen table, sunlight spilling over the floor, did I scroll through the aftermath. The group chat was chaos. It had started with stunned silence. Then the text came in fast. Mom, I don't understand. You agreed. The house was supposed to be for the family. Matt, this is beyond petty. We counted on that place for summer. You don't get to pull the rug like that. Amber, we had groceries, plans, RSVPs. How do you think this makes us look? Lacey, never one to miss a dramatic opportunity, wrote, I defended you to everyone. I told them you'd come through. I said you were just busy. You embarrassed me. That one actually made me laugh out loud. Then came the pivot, the phase where they realized the nice approach wasn't going to work, and they leaned into what they really thought. Matt, it was our family home before you swooped in and bought it. You don't deserve to hold it over our heads. You think being successful gives you a free pass to punish us? Amber again, this is exactly why no one takes you seriously. You throw money around, but you've never been part of the family where it counts. And finally, the cherry on top, my mother, bless her manipulative heart, I didn't raise you to be vindictive. What would your father think? That one stung. Not because it was true, but because he wouldn't have approved. He'd been gone for 5 years, and he was the only one who had ever made me feel like I had a place in this family. The house had been his, once. He taught me how to build shelves in the old garage, how to patch drywall and fix a leaky faucet. I bought it back for him. For his memory. But the people left behind had turned it into something selfish. Something transactional. Like it was owed to them because they carried his name. I didn't reply. Not to any of them. I deleted the group chat and blocked Amber's number. Then Matt's. Then Lacey's. I left my mother's unblocked, not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to sit with the silence. 3 days later, I got an email. From a law office I didn't recognize. It was a notice, not a lawsuit, just a letter of concern. Apparently, Matt had tried to claim the summer house as intended inheritance and was inquiring whether it had been misrepresented during estate planning. They wanted to open a discussion about how the property had been handled after our father's passing. I forwarded the email to Michelle. Her reply was brief, nothing to worry about. The house was purchased by you, with a clean title. There is no legal basis for their claim. Let me know if you'd like to send them a formal notice to back off. I told her to wait. Let them stew. Meanwhile, I made a decision I probably should have made years ago. I pulled the financial ledgers. I tracked every payment I'd made on my parents' behalf over the last decade, mortgage help, medical bills, car insurance. I tallied up the emergency fund I'd quietly topped up when Lacey's credit card was maxed out. The rent I'd paid when Matt and Amber couldn't afford their last place for a few months. It was over $67,000. And not once had I been thanked with sincerity. Not by the people who took the money. not by the family who said I was lucky to have it. I wasn't bitter. I was done. I took all the receipts, compiled them in a neatly formatted document, and attached them to a single email address to my mother. The subject line read, "So we're talking about entitlement now?" Inside, I wrote, "You once said I should be used to being left out. I suppose I am. But now, you'll all get used to something else, being on your own. Here's a breakdown of every expense I've covered over the years. Not because I expect repayment, but because I want you to see that I never had to be generous. I just chose to be. And you mistook that for weakness. I'll be handling my boundaries the same way I handled your bills, with absolute control. Best of luck with everything. Ryan." I had sinned. Then I called the property management company I'd hired for my rentals and added the summer house to their portfolio. It would now be listed as a high-end, short-term rental, with one condition in the fine print: no rentals approved for anyone with my last name. They'd never step foot in it again. But the story didn't stop there. Because families like mine, they don't go quietly. They didn't take it well. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd get the message. That after I cut off contact, blocked their numbers, and took away the one thing they cared about more than me, the summer house, they'd sit with that silence and learn something from it. But no, my family wasn't the type to reflect. They were the type to retaliate. It started small. A few weeks after my email, I got a call from the HOA near the summer house. Someone had filed a noise complaint. Then another, this time about unauthorized renovations. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was. I hadn't been to the property since the gate installation, and the security system proved it. No one had entered, no work had been done, and certainly no noise had been made. It was harassment, plain and simple. I had the HOA manager flag both complaints as frivolous and logged them in my file. Then came the anonymous one-star reviews. The property wasn't even live on rental platforms yet, but somehow it already had 3 scathing reviews. Dirty, unsafe, post is rude and impossible to deal with. They'd been posted using burner accounts, and while I couldn't prove it definitively, the usernames were suspicious. I had my lawyer send a cease and desist letter to each of them. Worded professionally, of course, but with enough legal weight to make them blink. Then I waited. Sure enough, a week later, the reviews disappeared. And that's when the real storm hit. One afternoon, I got a call from Michelle, my lawyer. Her tone was calm, but clipped. She'd received a formal letter from my mother's attorney. They were contesting my father's estate. 5 years later. Apparently, the new claim was that my father had made a verbal agreement to give the summer house to the family upon his death. Not in writing, not in a will. Just spoken. No witnesses. No proof. It was a desperation move. A baseless, legal longshot. I told Michelle to handle it, and I meant it. I didn't even want to see the paperwork. But still, it got to me. Not because I was scared. Not because I thought they'd win. But because it confirmed something I'd suspected deep down for a long time. They had never loved me for me. Only for what I gave them. What I could do for them. The second I stopped being useful, I stopped being family. The hearings were short. My father's will was crystal clear. The summer house had been foreclosed and removed from the estate years before his passing. I bought it back using my own funds. The judge dismissed the claim without hesitation and even warned their attorney not to waste court resources again. Michelle sent me the official letter with the ruling, and I framed it. Hung it in the guest room, right above the bookshelf my father helped me build when I was 15. Closure. Or so I thought. A month later, I got a call from my sister, Lacey. I almost didn't pick up. But something in me, it wasn't hope, not really, more like curiosity, made me swipe answer. Her voice was low, almost timid. "Ryan, I wanted to talk. Can we meet?" I paused, then said, "Say what you have to say now." She hesitated. "Look, things got out of hand. Mom's been losing it. She's telling everyone you've turned on the family, that you've gone cold since Dad passed away. She's rewriting history. And I know I haven't been great either, but..." I cut her off. "Lacey, you told people I embarrassed you. After you all planned a party in a house you never owned. After you sat there while Mom humiliated me at dinner and didn't say a word." "I didn't know she'd say that," she replied quickly. "You know how she is. She just gets..." "No," I said. "That excuse doesn't fly anymore. You know how she is, and you still chose to sit next to her. Laugh at her jokes. Benefit from it. You all did. I was your safety net, and the second I said no, suddenly I'm the villain." Silence. Then, quietly, "Are you really cutting us all off for good?" I took a breath. "I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just done being the one you all lean on without ever offering anything back. I'm done playing host, fixer, wallet, scapegoat. I gave you more chances than you ever gave me. And when I finally stood up for myself, you turned on me like I was the problem. So no, Lacey, I'm not coming back." She didn't argue. She just sighed. "Mom's going to hate that. Let her." I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to any of them. It's been 8 months since that Easter dinner. I've since converted the summer house into a full-time luxury rental. It's booked out through the year, with a wait list for the holidays. I reinvested the earnings into another property, this time out in the mountains. Quiet. Remote. Mine. My phone is quieter these days. No passive-aggressive texts. No guilt-tripping calls. No manipulative group chats asking me to fund someone's mistake. Instead, I wake up to emails from guests saying how much they loved the house, how peaceful it was, how it felt like someone poured care into every detail. I respond to each one with gratitude. Because I did. I poured my care into that place. My history. My time. My love. And now, I finally get to enjoy it for myself. I still think about them sometimes, my mother, my brother, Lacey. I wonder if they ever sit around and ask themselves how it all got so broken. If they ever feel even a flicker of regret for the way they treated me. I doubt it. But it doesn't matter anymore. I built a life that doesn't revolve around their approval. And for the first time in my life, I feel whole. So no, this isn't a story of family reconciliation. It's not a tidy bow where we all hug it out and pretend nothing happened. This is a story about boundaries. About finally realizing your worth. About walking away, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. And if they ever find this post, and I hope they do, I want them to know, you didn't lose me because I was selfish. You lost me because I finally learned not to be. And I'm never going back. My name's Adrian, and I'm 22 years old. I just graduated college this summer, something I had been working toward for years, quietly grinding through long nights of papers, endless study sessions, and part-time jobs to make sure I could afford living on my own. On the morning of my graduation, I woke up with this mix of nervousness and pride buzzing through my chest. I remember standing in front of the mirror in my black gown and cap, trying to steady my hands as I adjusted the tassel. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the verge of being seen, like maybe, just maybe, my family would look at me with something other than disappointment or indifference. But here's the thing. My family's never really cared about me in the way you'd expect. My younger brother, Caleb, is the golden child. He's 18, still in high school, and a soccer prodigy in my parents' eyes. Every weekend, our lives revolved around his games, tournaments, and practices. My dad would pace on the sidelines like he was coaching the World Cup. My mom would bring trays of snacks for the team, and even our extended relatives would sometimes show up to watch him kick a ball. Meanwhile, my achievements, honor roll, internships, scholarships, were treated like footnotes, polite nods followed by a quick subject change back to Caleb's goals or amazing assist. That morning, as I scrolled through the family group chat, I expected at least one excited message. Instead, I found a flood of texts about Caleb's biggest game of the season, happening at the same time as my graduation. "We can't miss this one," my mom wrote. My dad added, "It's his future, Adrian. You'll understand." Not a single word about my ceremony. I stared at those messages until the screen blurred. I wanted to reply, to remind them that I had been working for 4 years to earn that diploma. That today was the culmination of years of sacrifice. But I didn't. I slipped my phone into my pocket and told myself maybe they were just being quiet because they planned to surprise me. The auditorium was buzzing when I arrived. Rows of proud families waved and snapped photos as graduates walked by. I scanned the crowd, my heart racing, expecting to see my mom's face or my dad with his phone raised, recording. But the seats where I thought they'd be sat strangers, all clapping for their own kids. My friends spotted their parents instantly, cheering and holding flowers. My chest felt tight, but I forced myself to smile, telling myself maybe they were just running late. As the ceremony began, the reality started sinking in. When my name was called, and I walked across that stage, the applause felt hollow. I gripped the diploma, forcing myself to stand tall even as my stomach sank with each step. Cameras flashed, but none of them were for me. I glanced at the crowd one last time, and the truth hit me like a punch. They hadn't come. They had chosen Caleb's game over my graduation. When the ceremony ended, the other graduates ran into the arms of their families. Bouquets of flowers were passed around, parents crying and hugging their kids. I stood there in the middle of the chaos, holding a diploma case in one hand and my cap in the other, trying to keep the burning in my chest from showing on my face. I told myself to leave before the loneliness swallowed me whole, so I started walking toward the parking lot. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. For words, "Come home right now." Before I could even process it, my phone lit up again. 37 missed calls. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen, torn between anger and confusion. What could they possibly want from me, right now of all times, when they couldn't even show up for me? And that's where things really began to spiral. I slid into the driver's seat of my old Honda, diploma still on my lap, staring at those 37 missed calls. My stomach was twisted in knots. A part of me wanted to throw the phone into the passenger seat and drive away without a second thought. But another part of me, the part that had grown up always bending, always trying to earn a scrap of approval, pressed the call back button. My dad answered instantly, his voice sharp, impatient, like I was the one inconveniencing him. "Adrian, where are you? Get home right now. This is serious. No congratulations. No, we're proud of you." Not even a basic acknowledgement that I had just graduated. His tone was the same he used when telling me to pick up groceries or mow the lawn. My throat went dry. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Don't argue with me. Just come home. Caleb needs you." Those words made me pause. Caleb needs you. It was always Caleb. I was 22 years old. I had just closed a huge chapter of my life, and yet the first thing my dad said was that my younger brother needed me. My mind raced, filling with old memories, staying up late to help Caleb with school projects he left until the last minute, being guilt-tripped into giving him rides across town while I was studying, loaning him money I never saw again because he's just a kid. Always Caleb, always me cleaning up his messes. I swallowed my pride and asked, "Did something happen at the game?" Silence for a beat. Then he said, "Just get here. You'll see." And he hung up. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every rational part of me told me to ignore him, to celebrate my graduation on my own terms. But that old reflex, years of being conditioned to respond whenever they snapped their fingers, drove me back to the house. The entire ride, I kept imagining what awaited me. Maybe Caleb got hurt. Maybe there was some genuine emergency. That was the only explanation I could stomach for why they hadn't come to the ceremony. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the cars lined up outside. My parents' SUV, my aunt and uncle's minivan, even my grandparents' old sedan. For a moment, my heart lifted. Had they planned a surprise party after all? Maybe all those calls were part of some twisted attempt to get me home so they could cheer and finally recognize me. I stepped inside, diploma still in hand, bracing for balloons or streamers. Instead, I was hit with the smell of takeout pizza and the sound of laughter coming from the living room. The TV was blasting a replay of Caleb's soccer game. There he was on the screen, making a goal, and my entire family was crowded around cheering as if it were happening live. Nobody turned when I walked in. Nobody noticed the gown draped around my shoulders. It was like I was invisible. Finally, my mom glanced up, her expression flat, almost annoyed. "Oh good, you're here. We need you to drive Caleb to his friend's house later. He's celebrating with the team." I stood there frozen, the words barely registering. "Are you serious?" I finally asked, my voice trembling. My dad shot me a look. "Don't take that tone. Your brother just had the game of his life. We're all proud of him." He gestured to the TV, where Caleb was being interviewed by some local news reporter. This could open doors for scholarships, maybe even professional opportunities. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, the anger bubbling inside. They were watching a recorded game like it was the Super Bowl while I had just walked across a stage alone. No applause from them, no cheers, nothing. Caleb walked in from the kitchen, holding a slice of pizza, grinning ear to ear. "Adrian, did you see my goal?" Dad said scouts might be watching. He was beaming, his eyes full of excitement. And yet, not a single word about my graduation. I clenched my diploma tighter. "I graduated today." The room went quiet for a split second, then my grandmother chuckled softly, like she was brushing it off. "That's nice, dear. But this game, oh, Caleb, you were just amazing." I felt something inside me crack. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was humiliation. I had imagined this day 1,000 times, thought maybe it would be different. Instead, I was standing in a room full of people who couldn't even pretend to care. My mom frowned at me, like I was being difficult. You're always making things about you. Can't you just be happy for your brother for once? Happy for him. I had spent years swallowing my pride, stepping aside, letting him shine while I worked in the shadows. But this was supposed to be my moment. Just one. And they had taken even that. I didn't say another word. I walked past them, up the stairs to my old room, and shut the door. I sat on the bed, staring at the diploma in my hands, the weight of it heavier than I expected. I should have been proud, should have been smiling. Instead, all I felt was a gnawing sense of betrayal. As I sat there, I heard the laughter downstairs, Caleb's name being shouted over and over, like a chant. It hit me then that this wasn't just about today. This was the story of my entire life with them. And for the first time, instead of swallowing it, I started thinking, maybe I didn't need to play their game anymore. I sat upstairs in my old room for a long time, diploma balanced across my knees, listening to the muffled cheers and laughter coming from downstairs. Every few minutes, Caleb's name would echo through the walls, another round of applause at the replay of his game, another laugh about some moment I couldn't care less about. My chest ached, not just from the rejection, but from this growing realization that I'd been fooling myself for years. I had always told myself if I just worked harder, achieved more, kept my head down, they'd notice. But no matter what I did, Caleb would always come first. I stared at the diploma. It should have felt like victory, like freedom. Instead, it felt like proof of just how invisible I was to them. I kept hearing my mom's voice in my head. You're always making things about you. Was I? Or had I finally just asked for something so basic, acknowledgement, and even that was too much for them to give? I was about to shove the diploma into my backpack when there was a knock on the door. Caleb's voice. Hey, can I come in? I didn't answer right away, but he pushed the door open anyway, grinning like he had just won the lottery. He tossed his half-eaten pizza crust into my trash can and plopped down on my desk chair, spinning it around to face me. Man, Dad said scouts might actually call. Can you imagine me playing college ball? Maybe even pro. His eyes were glowing. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. After a few moments of awkward silence, he noticed the diploma in my hands. His grin faltered for half a second before he leaned back in the chair, smirking. So, you finally got your paper, huh? That's cool, I guess. But honestly, I don't know why you're so dramatic about it. It's not like anyone's gonna hire you just because you have some piece of paper. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. He wasn't just parroting arrogance. He was repeating what he had heard our parents say about me for years. To them, my education was a waste of time compared to his real talent. I managed to keep my voice calm. This took me 4 years. 4 years of working, studying, not relying on anyone. You could at least pretend it matters. He shrugged, leaning forward to grab one of the pens from my desk and twirl it in his fingers. I mean, it's fine. But come on, Adrian. Today was about me. Everyone came because they know I have a future. You'll get your chance someday. Maybe. That was the crack. The casual dismissal, the smug certainty that his game was worth more than 4 years of my life. But it wasn't just his words. It was the fact that he believed them, because everyone downstairs had fed him that narrative his whole life. He was the golden boy, and I was just the other son. Then he leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing some big secret. Oh, by the way, I used your laptop earlier. Hope that's cool. I needed to send highlights of my game to the coach, and your computer's faster than mine. I emailed them from your account. It looks more professional coming from a college graduate, right? He laughed like it was a harmless joke. My blood ran cold. You what? Relax, he said, rolling his eyes. I just attached the video and wrote a little intro. Nothing crazy. Coaches like seeing stuff from reliable people, and come on, you're the reliable one. Everyone knows that. They'll take me more seriously if it looks like I've got people backing me up. I stood up so fast he stopped spinning in the chair. Caleb, you had no right. Before I could finish, the door opened again. My dad stepped in, arms crossed, his expression already irritated. What's going on in here? He's overreacting, Caleb said immediately, smirking at me like he knew he'd already won. I just sent my highlight reel from his email. Big deal. My dad's eyes landed on me, sharp and disappointed. Adrian, stop making this about you. Your brother's future is at stake. If helping him means using your computer, then that's what you'll do. Don't be selfish. Selfish. The word rang in my ears, louder than anything else. I had spent years sacrificing my time, my money, my energy for this family, and now, after they abandoned me on my graduation day, after Caleb hijacked even my small piece of pride, I was being called selfish for daring to object. My voice cracked, but I forced it out. Do you even realize what today was for me? Do you know what it felt like to walk across that stage alone, with no one cheering for me, while you were all watching him kick a ball? My dad's face hardened. Don't talk about your brother's accomplishments like that. We're proud of him. You'll get your turn someday if you stop sulking. And then he did something that sealed it. He stepped over, took the diploma from my hands, and looked at it for barely a second before setting it on my desk, face down, like it was nothing more than a piece of junk mail. This is just paper, Adrian. What matters is what you do with it. Your brother's out there doing something that could actually change his life. Something inside me snapped. The diploma wasn't just paper. It was years of nights spent studying until my eyes burned, of missing out on parties, of scraping together rent money. And to him, it meant nothing. To all of them, it meant nothing. I felt a heat in my chest, a sharp clarity that I hadn't felt before. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this, no hoping for recognition. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was betrayal. They had taken the most important day of my life and crushed it under their obsession with Caleb. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream, didn't argue. I just looked at them, my smug brother and my dismissive father, and knew something had changed. And while they went back downstairs, laughing, planning Caleb's future, I sat in silence, staring at my diploma on the desk. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to win their approval. I was thinking about how to make them regret ever underestimating me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my old bed, staring up at the ceiling while the glow from the streetlight cut sharp lines across the walls. Every laugh, every cheer drifting up from downstairs replayed in my head until it felt like they were mocking me. My diploma sat on the desk, turned upside down, just as my dad had left it. I hadn't picked it up again. I couldn't bring myself to. For years, I told myself their indifference was just a misunderstanding, that maybe if I did better, tried harder, they'd see me. But the moment my dad set my diploma face down as if it were worthless, it all became clear. They weren't blind to what I'd done. They just didn't care. My achievements didn't fit their narrative. Caleb was the star, and I was the extra. The next morning, I came downstairs in plain clothes, no gown, no cap. My mom was frying eggs while humming. My dad had the newspaper open, and Caleb was scrolling through his phone with the same grin he'd worn since the game. I sat quietly, waiting for someone to say something about yesterday. Anything. But no one did. Instead, my mom glanced at me and said, "You'll take Caleb to practice later, right? He has a big tournament coming up, and we don't want him worrying about buses." I let out a hollow laugh before I could stop myself. Of course, because nothing else I do matters, right? My dad lowered his paper, his eyes narrowing. "Adrian, don't start. You're 22. It's time you grew up. Your brother has a future, and he needs our support. You should be proud to help him." I wanted to scream, to shout that I had a future too, that I had just graduated, that I had built something for myself without anyone's help. But the words stuck in my throat. What was the point? They'd twist it, call me selfish again. So I said nothing. Caleb smirked across the table, his voice smug. "Don't worry, Dad. Adrian likes being the responsible one. He'll drive me." I stared down at my plate, appetite gone, hands clenched in my lap. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just hurt. I was trapped. They weren't going to let me celebrate my own success, and they weren't going to give me space to breathe. They were going to keep using me until I broke. The following days blurred together. I went through the motions, driving Caleb to practices, running errands my parents asked for, all while they carried on like nothing had happened. Whenever I walked into a room, they were laughing about Caleb's game, rewatching highlights, or speculating about his future career. If I tried to talk about job hunting, interviews, or the degree I'd worked so hard for, the conversation died instantly or was redirected back to him. The silence was suffocating. At night, I lay awake replaying the graduation ceremony in my head, the empty stands where my family should have been, the hollow echo of my name as I crossed the stage alone. It gnawed at me, not just the absence, but the knowledge that they had chosen to be absent. They hadn't forgotten. They had made a choice. One evening, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My dad's voice was low but firm. "We'll need to save for Caleb's trips if the scouts show interest. Adrian can help cover gas until he finds a real job. It's the least he can do. The least I can do. I pressed my back against the wall outside the kitchen, my hands trembling. I had worked my way through college without their help. I had taken out loans, picked up shifts wherever I could, lived frugally so I wouldn't have to ask them for anything. And now, they wanted me to bankroll Caleb's future? That was rock bottom for me. Not just being ignored, but being expected to sacrifice even more, as if my own dreams didn't exist. I felt hollowed out, a shell of myself, moving quietly through a house where my existence barely registered unless it served someone else. But in that silence, something began to shift. I stopped talking at the dinner table. I stopped trying to share updates about my job search. I stopped waiting for them to notice me. Instead, I started taking long drives by myself after dropping Caleb off, using the time to think, to plan. I began keeping notes in a small journal hidden in my backpack, ideas about what I wanted to do, how I could get out, and maybe, just maybe, how I could make them feel what I was feeling. Each page I filled with quiet determination. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was done playing their game. They had made their choice. And now, slowly, carefully, I was going to make mine. I don't think my family even noticed when I started pulling away. In fact, that's what made it so easy. Their eyes were always on Caleb, his practices, his tournaments, his endless highlight reels. My absence at the dinner table, my silence in conversations, the way I slipped out of the house for hours at a time, it barely registered. And in that space, in that quiet, I started to breathe again. The first thing I did was move my diploma out of the house. I couldn't stand seeing it face down on my desk, forgotten and dismissed. One Saturday, while everyone was at Caleb's game, I packed it carefully into my bag and drove to my small apartment near campus. I had been keeping it as a backup during school, but now, for the first time, it felt like a sanctuary. When I hung the diploma on the wall above my desk, it looked different. Not just paper, not just another achievement they'd brushed aside. It was mine, proof of what I'd done despite them. The following weeks, I poured myself into job applications. At first, I felt discouraged. Every listing asked for experience I didn't have, or companies I thought wouldn't give me a chance. But then one morning, my phone buzzed with an email from a mid-sized firm downtown. They wanted an interview. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, heart pounding. It wasn't just an interview. It was the first spark of possibility. The thought that maybe, outside the suffocating bubble of my family's house, someone might actually see me for who I was. I prepared like my life depended on it. I stayed up late practicing answers, ironing my one decent suit, rehearsing in front of the mirror. The morning of the interview, I drove downtown, the city skyline sharp against the blue sky, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. The firm's office was sleek, modern, filled with the low hum of productivity. When I sat across from the hiring manager, I told my story, not about being overshadowed or dismissed, but about working through college, juggling jobs and classes, learning discipline and persistence. 2 days later, they called. I got the job. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't six figures, but it was solid. A real start. I sat in my apartment after hanging up the phone, grinning like an idiot, the weight on my chest lifting just a little. Back at home, though, my family barely noticed the change. When I told them, my mom smiled faintly, as if humoring me, and said, "That's nice, Adrian. But don't let it interfere with helping your brother." My dad didn't even look up from his laptop. Caleb, with his mouth full of chips, muttered, "Congrats, I guess." And that was fine, because the difference was, I no longer needed their approval. The first paycheck arrived a month later. Holding it in my hands felt surreal. I'd made money before, through part-time jobs, tutoring, working at cafes, but this was different. This was career money, proof that I was stepping into a new world. Instead of blowing it, I did something deliberate. I opened a savings account in my name only, no co-signers, no access for anyone else. Every month, I funneled money into it, quietly building something of my own. Meanwhile, Caleb's games grew bigger, and my parents grew louder with their dreams for him. They talked about scholarships, about travel teams, about sending tapes to national recruiters. But I started noticing cracks. A bad game here. A minor injury there. The scouts they claimed were definitely watching never seemed to call. I didn't say anything. I just nodded when they spoke, then went back to my own work. At night, I networked on LinkedIn, joined professional groups, even signed up for an online certification course to make myself more valuable. Every step was slow, steady, deliberate. And with every new milestone, every completed project at work, every dollar saved, I felt myself pulling further away from the grip my family had on me. One Friday evening, after a long week at my new job, I sat on the balcony of my apartment with a cheap takeout dinner, watching the sun set behind the city. My phone buzzed with yet another family text about Caleb's big tournament that weekend. I muted the thread without hesitation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't aching to be included. I was content being on the outside, because the outside was where I could finally grow. But beneath the calm, a sharper thought was taking root. I wasn't just going to move on. I wasn't just going to succeed quietly. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had thrown away when they dismissed me. And deep down, I knew my rise was only the beginning of something bigger. It was about 6 months into my new job when the first real shift happened. By then, I'd settled into a rhythm, commuting downtown, working with my team, slowly proving myself. At first, I was just another fresh graduate in a cubicle, but I put in the hours, asked the right questions, and stayed late to learn from people who'd been there for years. My manager noticed. Soon I wasn't just doing grunt work. I was trusted with small projects, then bigger ones. And every time I succeeded, it gave me more confidence that I was finally building something for myself, outside of my family's shadow. Then came the day my manager called me into his office. He was a serious man, not prone to flattery, so when he said, "Adrian, you've got a good head for this. How would you feel about training to take on client accounts?" I almost didn't believe him. Handling clients meant visibility, responsibility, and, most importantly, a stepping stone to real power in the company. I agreed immediately, and that's when I started seeing just how much influence one person could have if they played their cards right. I was suddenly in meetings with executives, negotiating contracts, reviewing budgets, learning the inner workings of decisions that shaped careers. It was like being given a glimpse into a world my parents could never imagine. Around the same time, I began expanding my life outside of work. I joined a networking group for young professionals in the city, and that's where I met people my age who were also carving out their paths, some in finance, some in law, some even in sports management. We exchanged contacts, shared advice, and built connections that stretched further than I ever thought possible. It was exhilarating. And then, one night over drinks, one of those connections, a woman who worked in sports recruiting, mentioned Caleb's league. "Honestly, it's saturated right now," she said. "Tons of parents think their kids are the next big star. Unless someone is really exceptional, scouts don't even blink. The resources are limited, and most of these kids burn out before college." I sat there, listening carefully, hiding the flicker of recognition that ran through me. She wasn't talking about Caleb directly, but I knew the truth. He wasn't as exceptional as my family believed. He was good, sure, but good wasn't enough in a world that chewed up and spat out kids who didn't make the cut. That was the first seed of leverage. Knowledge. I didn't even need to expose it yet. Just knowing that the dream my parents were betting everything on was shaky at best. It gave me a strange, quiet sense of power. Meanwhile, at work, my account training paid off. I closed a deal with a small client, then a bigger one. By the end of the year, I was offered a raise in my own list of accounts to manage. The money wasn't astronomical, but with my savings and careful budgeting, I started to build something tangible. I even invested a portion, guided by a mentor at the firm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was positioning myself. Back home, the contrast was stark. Caleb's games became more erratic. Sometimes he was brilliant, other times sloppy. An injury benched him for a few weeks, and I overheard heated arguments between my parents about medical bills and whether the dream was still realistic. But whenever I visited, they put on the same facade, cheering him on, insisting scouts were interested, asking me to contribute here and there because family supports family. I never outright refused, but I stopped saying yes too. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and redirected the conversation. Quietly, I kept building. Quietly, I let them assume I was still the same passive Adrian who could be leaned on without question. What they didn't know was that I had begun documenting everything. Every time they asked me for money. Every time Caleb used something of mine without permission. Every dismissive comment. Every manipulation. It all went into that same journal I'd started months earlier. I wasn't just venting anymore. I was archiving, creating a record, preparing. The pivotal moment came one Sunday when I visited the house. My dad pulled me aside and said, "You're doing well now, right? Good job, good money. You should help your brother. Cover his training camp fees this summer. It's an investment in his future." I looked him in the eye and said, "I'll think about it." Inside, though, I knew my answer. Not only would I not pay, I would make sure, one day, they understood exactly what it meant to dismiss me. Because by then, I had something I'd never had before. Independence, financial stability, connections, knowledge. For the first time, I wasn't just the overlooked son. I was becoming someone they couldn't ignore forever. And as I left that night, driving back to my apartment with the city lights in the distance, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. They had built their world on Caleb, but I was quietly building mine. And when the time came, mine would overshadow theirs in ways they could never have imagined. The thing about revenge is that it's never about rushing. It's about patience, waiting until the timing is perfect, until the pieces fall into place naturally. By the time my plan began to crystallize, nearly a year had passed since that graduation day. In that time, my career had taken off faster than I ever thought possible. I wasn't just another junior employee anymore. I was managing clients, bringing in revenue, even mentoring interns who looked at me the way I used to look at everyone else. My bank account grew steadily, my investments started compounding, and little by little, I became someone my family couldn't control. Meanwhile, Caleb's bright future was dimming. His injuries piled up, small but nagging. An ankle sprain, a pulled hamstring, nothing catastrophic but enough to slow him down. The scouts my parents had been so sure about? They never called. The college scholarships they spoke about at every dinner? Non-existent. And yet, my family doubled down, clinging to the fantasy. They spent money on private coaches, on camps, on new gear. They borrowed from relatives. They hinted, again and again, that I should contribute. That was where my revenge began to take shape. I didn't refuse outright. That would have made me the enemy too soon. Instead, I started asking questions. How much are the fees? Do you think this investment makes sense if he's still injured? Have you thought about a backup plan? Each time, I watched their faces tighten, watched my dad's jaw clench, watched Caleb snap at me for doubting him. I wasn't doubting him. I was planting seeds. Then came the opportunity one couldn't have scripted better if I tried. My firm partnered with a local sports association on a community sponsorship deal. It wasn't a glamorous contract, mostly funding equipment and local events, but it gave me access to conversations with people who actually worked in recruiting and talent development. And from those conversations, one truth became undeniable. Caleb wasn't even on the radar. I didn't tell my family this outright. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I set the stage. One Saturday evening, I invited them all to my apartment. It was the first time they'd seen the place since I'd really settled in. They walked in, glancing around at the clean, modern furniture, the framed diploma on the wall, the view of the city skyline. My mom made a little sound of surprise. My dad tried to hide his, but I saw the way his eyes lingered on the details. Caleb flopped onto my couch like he owned it, grabbing a soda from my fridge without asking. After dinner, I casually steered the conversation. "Funny thing," I said, keeping my tone light. "I've been working with people in sports associations lately. They see a lot of players come through. It's competitive." My mom leaned forward eagerly. "Did anyone mention Caleb?" I shook my head slowly. "Not by name, but they did say something interesting. Most players who make it have backups. Education, other skills. Families who support them in multiple ways." I let the words hang, watching them land. My dad frowned. "What are you trying to say?" I smiled faintly. "Just that it's risky to put everything on one dream. Sometimes it doesn't pan out, no matter how much you want it to." The room went quiet for a beat, and I saw Caleb bristle, his pride stung. "I'll make it," he snapped. "You'll see." I leaned back, my voice calm. "Maybe. But I've been learning something important these past months. Results speak louder than promises." That night, after they left, I set the final phase in motion. I knew my parents would come to me soon, asking, no, demanding, money for Caleb's next camp. And when they did, I would be ready. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, my dad called. His tone was brisk, like it was already decided. "Adrian, your brother's camp fees are due. It's an important opportunity. We need you to cover it this time. I let the silence stretch before answering. I can't do that. He exploded instantly. Can't. Or won't. You're doing well, aren't you? This is your family. I took a slow breath, letting the calm in my voice cut sharper than anger ever could. Family supports each other, right? That's what you've always said. So tell me, Dad, where were you on my graduation day? When I needed support, when I needed my family to show up. The line went quiet. I pressed on. You chose Caleb's game. You made it clear where your priorities were. So now, I've made mine. I'm investing in my future, my career, my stability. If Caleb wants something, he can work for it, just like I did. My father sputtered, furious, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of yelling. I ended the call politely, firmly, and then I waited. Over the next few weeks, the fallout began. Relatives started whispering. Apparently, my parents had gone to them asking for money, spinning the story that I was being selfish. But the more they complained, the more people started asking why their college graduate son was thriving while their golden boy wasn't delivering results. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore. And I just kept rising. Promotions, connections, a life they couldn't touch. The revenge wasn't a single explosive act. It was quieter, sharper. It was in the way I withheld what they expected, the way I let their choices catch up to them, the way my success became a mirror, forcing them to see the emptiness of the pedestal they'd built for Caleb. And I wasn't done yet, because I had one last move planned, one that would turn the knife they had driven into me all those years and make them feel it themselves. The call that finally sealed everything came on a gray Sunday afternoon. I was sitting at my apartment desk, reviewing a client proposal, when my phone buzzed with my mother's name. I considered ignoring it. I'd been doing that more often, but something told me to pick up. Her voice was strained, almost trembling. Adrian, please. Your father doesn't want me to say this, but we're out of options. Caleb's latest injury is worse than we thought. The doctor says he might need surgery if he wants to play again. Insurance won't cover it all. We need help with the money. I closed my eyes, the words sinking in. This was it. The dream they'd sacrificed everything for. The games, the favoritism, even my graduation, was collapsing. And now, they were coming to me. The son they had called selfish, invisible, unimportant. For a moment, I thought about all the nights I'd driven Caleb around, all the times I'd been dismissed, the look on my dad's face when he'd flipped my diploma upside down. Then I spoke, steady and calm. Mom, I can't do that. I've built my life on my own, with no help from you or Dad. You made your choice when you decided Caleb's game mattered more than my future. Now, I've made mine. She was silent, just her uneven breathing on the line. Then, almost a whisper, so that's it? You'll let your family fall apart. I answered without hesitation. I didn't let anything happen. You did. And then I ended the call. The fallout came fast. Within weeks, the whispers from relatives turned into outright judgment. People who once praised my parents for raising a star athlete now questioned their choices. My grandparents, once doting over Caleb, started asking why I had been left alone on my graduation day. Word of their favoritism spread wider than they ever expected, and soon they were on the defensive, scrambling to justify themselves to a family that no longer admired them. Caleb's surgery went ahead, but the scouts never came calling. His career ended before it began, and he grew bitter, lashing out at the very parents who had once worshipped him. My father's pride shriveled into resentment, my mother's denial into quiet shame. Their golden child was no longer golden. And with every success I stacked, another promotion, another milestone, another step into the life I had built, they felt the distance grow. Months later, I ran into an old family friend at a cafe. They leaned across the table, lowering their voice as if sharing a secret. Your parents regret what they did, you know. Everyone knows how they treated you. Now they sit alone at Caleb's empty games, talking about what could have been. But everyone else, they talk about you, the son who made it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded, because by then I didn't need their approval. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was living a life so far above the one they had tried to confine me to that their neglect became their punishment. On the anniversary of my graduation, I went out to dinner by myself. I ordered the best meal on the menu, raised a quiet toast to the diploma that hung proudly on my wall, and felt the weight of the past lift just a little. As I set the glass down, I thought of that moment on stage, holding my diploma with no one cheering for me. Back then, it had felt like the loneliest moment of my life. Now, I realized it had been the beginning of everything. And with that, I whispered to myself, I don't need them. I never did. Then I walked out into the night, leaving their world behind for good.